Wednesday night. Notice, however, the swirl is just a little closer. That low pressure is moving in towards the UK, so a slightly different distribution of the showers on Thursday. It means that in some locations they could be quite slow moving. A lot of cloud and outbreaks of rain coming into parts of northeast England, eastern Scotland. Elsewhere, I think we'll see more showers on Thursday across southern parts. Again, heavy, thundery downpours, a lot of rain falling in a short space of time, and temperatures just dropping off by a degree or so perhaps come Thursday. There's that low. It is then moving in, bringing more heavy showers on Friday, but starting to pull away, so things looking a lot drier for most of us on Saturday.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales
and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio and online. We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Hello and welcome to GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. Now, you can't take your eyes off today's show, ladies and gentlemen. It will be full of breaking news, cabinet appointments, big hitting guests and fiery debates as we chalk off yet another historic day for Britain. We will be live in Downing Street where Liz Truss will give her first speech as the new Prime Minister. In a very British twist on proceedings, she'll be doing it outside unless, of course, it's raining, in which case she'll head inside and duck for cover like she's at a barbecue. But we are, of course, on Cabinet Watch as well. Who's in her top team? Who's made the cut? We're debating Boris Johnson's legacy. Was he good for Britain? Will he be remembered fondly? Boris fanatic Alex Story takes on Boris hater Matthew Stadlen. Fireworks from the off. We're also going to be talking as well to Tobias Ellwood very, very shortly to get his hot take on Liz Truss and the outgoing former Prime Minister Boris Johnson. But talking of fanatics, we are nothing without you, you lovely lot, so get in touch. Boris is not yet cold in his political grave, but today we're asking you to look ahead and say whether or not you think Liz Truss can beat Keir Starmer. Go to @GB News on Twitter. Take part in a poll that we'll have rocking and rolling very shortly. Did Boris Johnson's final speech make you even more depressed at his departure? gbviews@gbnews.uk is that email. Don't be shy, get in touch. Get yourselves ready for 3 hours of fast-paced breaking news. But first is your headlines with the wonderful Rosie Wright.
Thanks, Patrick. A very good afternoon to you. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 3. I'm Rosie, keeping you up to date. Liz Truss is now the country's new Prime Minister. She had an audience with the Queen at Balmoral Castle and was invited to form a new government. The new Prime Minister's now left Scotland. She's expected this afternoon to announce an emergency support package to deal with the energy crisis when she addresses the nation for the first time from Downing Street. She's also due to name her cabinet. We'll, of course, bring you that speech here. Well, the Deputy Labour leader, Angela Rayner, says the Conservatives have failed to provide a sound solution on energy.
Liz Truss' plan seems to be to adopt Labour's position of freezing the energy cap at the moment so people are not paying more, but to put that burden back onto the taxpayers and to increase debt. What Labour has said is that we should have a windfall tax on gas and oil companies that pays for this freeze, but we need a longer term solution to look at renewables, to retrofit homes, to make sure that our energy is self-sufficient and that our homes are as energy efficient as they possibly can be. There's been no plan from the Conservatives.
Well, earlier, Buckingham Palace confirmed Boris Johnson had tendered his resignation, which Her Majesty, they said, was graciously pleased to accept. Mr Johnson and his wife, Carrie, spent almost 40 minutes with the monarch before leaving Balmoral. The Scottish Government is introducing emergency legislation to freeze rents as part of a major plan to deal with the cost of living crisis. Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, announced a temporary hold on evictions as she presented her programme for government. She also said ScotRail fares will be frozen until at least March next year and confirmed an energy strategy will be published in the coming year. A man has died after being shot by police in South London. Lambeth Police says a suspect vehicle was being chased and officers deliberately crashed into the car, forcing it to stop in Streatham Hill on Monday night. A police firearm was discharged and a man thought to be in his 20s was injured. The Met Police has referred itself for an investigation into the incident. The father of Olivia Pratt-Corbell, who was shot in Liverpool, says her death cannot be in vain. The 9-year-old was killed by a gunman who chased his intended target into her home last month. John Francis Pratt is appealing for anyone with information to come forward. Detectives have been granted with a 36-hour extension to question 3 men over her death. Official sources have told GB News that an Albanian set of criminal gangs are risking major tragedy by pushing small boats into the English Channel in poor weather. Despite deteriorating conditions, Ministry of Defence figures show 188 people crossed into UK waters yesterday, and today at least 3 small boats were intercepted. So far this year, more than 27,500 people have made the journey across the Channel. A new £370 million HS2 station is set to bring around 1,000 new jobs to the West Midlands. The Mayor, Andy Street, says it will play a critical role in the area's economic recovery. Construction for the Birmingham Interchange Station, which will service the NEC, the city's airport and Solihull, has already begun, but it won't open until 2026. While speaking to Gloria De Piero, Mr Street said the new jobs will be given to locals.
1,000 jobs, critical, and we will be making sure that they are given to local people. Indeed, we'll be working with the contractors, as we already are, with Balfour Beatty, for example, to train local people, unemployed people, specifically for jobs in HS2. So we've got a great record on that, and I'm sure we'll do the same with Lango Rourke.
Tens of thousands of firefighters and control room staff will be balloted for industrial action. The Fire Brigades Union says it follows a 2% pay offer made in June, which hasn't increased despite inflation. The FBU claims it represents a real terms pay cut. We're expecting the vote to be held next month. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex are in Germany to promote the Invictus Games. Prince Harry and Meghan have arrived for a reception in Dusseldorf to mark 1 year until the event gets underway. Prince Harry founded the Games to help aid the rehabilitation of military personnel and veterans, giving them the challenge of competing in sporting events similar to the Paralympics. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to Patrick.
Here we go, Britain. We waved goodbye to one of the most popular prime ministers of all time, and now Liz Truss has the task of leading this country through one of the most tricky periods of all time. Here's how we're going to whiz you through yet another historic day right here on GB News Live. The Queen, who looked rather well, actually, I think, all things considered, welcomed Liz Truss. Despite many of you wanting Her Majesty to not accept Boris Johnson's resignation, she decided not to break with hundreds of years of tradition. We've got a fiery debate on Boris Johnson's legacy as well. We are, of course, on Cabinet Watch throughout the show, which largely involves us staring at a front door, but we will make that exciting for you. But joining us now from College Green to get things rocking and rolling in a big way is Tobias Ellwood, the chair of the Defence Select Committee. He was one of Boris Johnson's most fierce critics in the Parliamentary Conservative Party, now sits as an independent MP after having his whip removed in July. And what some are saying was a rather petty move, but there we go. Tobias, thank you very much for joining us just outside the seats of power. First things first, are you going to get your whip back?
I do. I mean, that's not going to be the priority of this Prime Minister. We'll await what she has to say at 4 o'clock, but certainly I'd be delighted to receive the whip back.
Absolutely. Well, look, let's crack on with, as you rightly said there, some of the priorities of this incoming Prime Minister, the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss. The big one today is seeming that she's going to freeze energy bills. That could well cost, apparently, about £130 billion. What do you make of this, then? Because is this just kicking money down the road? Is she doing what all Prime Ministers seem to do, appeasing people today at the expense of people tomorrow?
I think the nation would see through that, but absolutely right that there is a short-term plan to get us through a very difficult winter. We need an operational response to the difficulties that we face immediately, and then a longer-term solution, a strategy to make sure that we can ride this economic storm. So I think that's what we're going to hear over the next few days, is details on how we can support those people who are most vulnerable. But linking with what the Prime Minister said today, he spoke about Ukraine. I also hope we'll hear a recognition that a lot of these roads, a lot of the concerns that we have today about oil and gas prices, food prices as well, leading into that cost of living crisis, take you to Ukraine. And we need to do more to stand up to Putin, to stand up to Russia's aggression in Eastern Europe. If we don't put this fire out in Ukraine, it will spread elsewhere. Putin is after economic dominance, and that means more hardship here in the UK. So let's see some British leadership working with our American partners to finally stand up to what Russia is doing.
Well, this is an issue. I'm glad you brought up Ukraine, because I read with interest an article quoting you in it from about 3 days ago, where you were pretty adamant that you felt as though nuclear weapons could well be used within the next decade. That means that Liz Truss has to be the right person to lead this country. Do you think she is, or are we all going to die in a nuclear inferno, Tobias?
Well, let's take that one step at a time. It's important that the party rallies around the new Prime Minister, but indeed the nation as well. This is the Prime Minister that we're going to have for the next couple of years, and the problems that are in her in tray are arguably bigger than that Churchill faced back in 1940. So it's in all our collective interest to support her at this moment. We do need to move to a warlike footing. But my comment about the use of nuclear weapons over the next decade is how dangerous our world is becoming, and we're doing very little about it. Afghanistan was a turning point, if you like, on the world's desire, ability, appetite to defend our international rules-based order, and the aggressors around the world are taking advantage of that. And my worry is the proliferation of weapon systems, of chemical weapons and so forth. We could easily see a tactical, low-yield nuclear weapon being used either by a state or non-state, simply because we don't have the appetite to stand up to these nations that may eventually use one of these weapons.
Does Liz Truss have your confidence there?
Yeah, absolutely. She needs to. My humble advice would be to learn from previous prime ministers who have faced crises, that have then not only answered the crisis, but then taken the nation forward. You know, the people like Disraeli, people like Churchill, people like Thatcher as well. I mean, everybody was trying to emulate Thatcher during this leadership contest, but she had Michael Heseltine and Ken Clarke on one side, and Nigel Lawson and Norman Tebbit on the other, the big beasts that were in the cabinet, that the nation could then recognise, yes, absolutely, I can buy into the plan, buy into the team, I'll support that. If we just go to our tribal base, we won't gain the support of the nation.
Will you be in the cabinet?
I'll be delighted just to get the whip back, to be honest.
Delighted just to get... But you wouldn't turn down a cabinet position, Tobias?
If you're invited to take on one of the great offices of state, particularly in this difficult time, then absolutely, I think it's your duty to then step forward if you can offer some support in these difficult times. I do hope, I recognise Labour will feel the need to be difficult to Liz Truss. It's so important that we recognise the scale of challenge that we face. We must solve these problems today, otherwise tomorrow will become much, much difficult.
Tobias, thank you very much for making the time for us. Tobias Ellwood there on College Green, just outside, well, the House of Power. I mean, he's been talking that up massively about the problems facing Liz Truss as she embarks on her first foray into the Conservative Party leadership, into being Prime Minister. Lots in her in tray, as we've discussed. He mentioned there she needs to be like some kind of combination of Thatcher and Churchill. Do you think that she could be? But first, before we get stuck into a fiery debate, we're looking back on Boris Johnson's legacy. Was it good? Was it bad? How do you feel about it all? But I wanted us to earth ourselves. Let's take stock. And our reporter, Ellie Costello, gives you a quick summary on what on earth has gone on so far today.
After a 7-week leadership contest, the moment had come for Boris Johnson to resign as Prime Minister. But not before one final performance of defiance outside number 10.
This is it, folks. The baton will be handed over in what has unexpectedly turned out to be a relay race. They changed the rules halfway through, but never mind that now.
He hinted that he hopes for a return to number 10 by comparing himself to Cincinnatus, the Roman statesman best remembered for being called out of retirement to lead the people again.
Like Cincinnatus, I am returning to my plough, and I will be offering this government nothing but the most fervent support.
Boris Johnson said he would back Liz Truss and urge the Conservative Party to unite, comparing them to the age-old fight between cats and dogs, using his dog Dylan and Downing Street cat Larry as examples.
And I know that Liz Truss and this compassionate Conservative government will do everything we can to get people through this crisis, and this country will endure it and we will win. If Dylan and Larry can put behind them their occasional difficulties, then so can the Conservative Party.
After the speech, some of the Prime Minister's most loyal allies shared hugs and souvenir snaps. Mr Johnson and his wife Carrie then boarded a plane from RAF Northolt in West London to Balmoral. And it was there, in Her Majesty's green drawing room, where Boris Johnson met Her Majesty to offer his formal resignation. Next, it was the turn of the new leader of the Conservative Party and Prime Minister-elect Liz Truss, who boarded a plane to Scotland. After landing, she was driven to Balmoral for her audience with the Queen, where Her Majesty officially asked her to form a government. It's not the first time Liz Truss has met Her Majesty, but a private audience will be a unique experience for her. Today, Liz Truss becomes the 15th Prime Minister to serve the Queen. The next task is to start naming her cabinet, with Home Secretary Priti Patel and Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries already resigning. Liz Truss will also give the big speech of the day, her first addressing the nation as Prime Minister. Ellie Costello, GB News.
OK, so that's where we are today. Now, this show is going to be stacked full of breaking news as Liz Truss does deliver her Downing Street speech, unless it's raining, in which case it's going to be inside. Classic, of course. We're also going to be on Cabinet Watch, so we're going to give you the rolling breaking news throughout the show. But first, I want you just to look back a little bit. Boris Johnson gave his farewell speech from the steps of Downing Street shockingly early this morning. But what about his legacy? Do you miss him? Do you think it's good riddance? Joining me to discuss this now is Alex Story and journalist broadcaster Matthew Stadlen. Alex Story, of course, of the Bring Back Boris campaign. Matthew Stadlen is, fair to say, not a Boris fan. Now, chaps, I think sparks are probably going to fly early doors here. Alex, I'll start with you of the Bring Back Boris campaign. Alex Story, you've got about 60 seconds initially to whiz us through what you think Boris Johnson's legacy is.
First one is that without him, there would have been no Brexit. I think we probably would have lost the Leave campaign. That obviously led to Theresa May. Theresa May then being Prime Minister, I think, was a complete disaster. I think all of us can accept that. He brought unity back by his stonking victory. I think after that, there was very little time for him to express himself, given that the victory that he had was in December 2019 and COVID hit straight away. I think the big mistake, from my perspective, is to have gone down for lockdown when initially his gut feeling was right, which would have been no lockdown, the Swedish model. Let's separate the people, the elderly from the young, and let's keep the society open. I think that was the beginning of the end of his premiership in many ways.
OK, well, just inside your 60 seconds there, very concise. Matthew, the gauntlet has been laid down. That's Alex's version of Boris Johnson's history. What's yours?
Well, first of all, when you introduced me, you said that I was a Boris hater, and I don't hate Boris Johnson, I don't hate anyone, but I think he's probably been the worst Prime Minister of the last 100 years. You just have to ask his own MPs. 148 of them voted no confidence in him a couple of months ago. That's within 3 years of him becoming Prime Minister in the first place. He has squandered an 80-seat majority. For all you Tories out there watching, he has squandered an 80-seat majority. He could have done huge and big things with that majority. He hasn't. He has misled us repeatedly. Many would say he has lied to us repeatedly. He has lost ethics advisors, 2 of them, I think. That's pretty careless for a Prime Minister. He unlawfully prorogued Parliament. He had contempt for the rule of law. He broke his own lockdown rules, which was disgraceful. I mean, not just Boris Johnson himself, but the culture within Number 10 that he fostered. People were partying while others were dying. I need a lot more than 60 seconds. I could go on for 6 hours.
Well, we'll cut you off there then. And that was, I'm reliably informed, bang on 60 seconds. So you've got an inbuilt timer. Alex, Matthew's painted a rather damning picture of Boris Johnson there. I mean, you wanted to bring this guy back. Why?
To bring him back just for the principle, which is in a democracy you elect a leader for a period of time. The story, or at least the alternative story that I've just heard, in my view, is essentially a symptom of what this kind of society that we're living through. A leader is in place, he's not quite up to your taste, so you want him out. But actually, in the long term, that's really, really damaging. Liz Truss cannot be confident that her MPs won't get rid of her because the polls are wrong. But actually, all this idea that Boris Johnson misled Parliament, or that he lied, or that he was dishonest, these are statements, but they're not facts. They're not being proven. And certainly, if you're going to say that Boris was a liar, against whom is he being compared? Is he being compared against Tony Blair, for instance, or Gordon Brown? I mean, we're talking here about somebody whose main sin or peccadillo was to have a glass of Prosecco. When we're comparing him to people like Tony Blair, where are the scales? I mean, are we seriously saying that is the thing that's going to define and bring somebody down?
All right, Alex, thank you very much. Matthew, I'll lob it back your way. The vaccine rollouts, the war in Ukraine, the line from Boris Johnson and indeed his supporters is that he got the big calls right. I mean, Labour were nowhere to be found in all of this stuff, were they?
Yeah, just firstly on the lying or the misleading, Alex, you just have to go to Google, look up Prime Minister's questions from December, look up many other statements he made along the way in which he attempted to convince us, the public, and his own party as well, that he had broken no rules as far as he knew, as far as he'd been led to believe were broken. They were broken. He was fined by the police. That's pretty disgraceful. And the way that our parliamentary democracy works is if you don't have the support of your own MPs, or if scores of your own ministers resign, as they did a month or 2 ago, you cannot survive in office. Just quickly, just onto Patrick's point about Ukraine.
OK, Alex, hold on 1 second, very quickly, Matthew.
Just onto Patrick's point about Ukraine. He did make the right call on Ukraine. I don't begrudge him that. He was brave in the way that he helped to lead the Western alliance against the evil of Putin. And as far as the vaccine rollout is concerned, the credit I would give him on that is that Dame Kate Bingham, who did an incredible job on that rollout, was appointed under his premiership. So if we're going to blame him for things that went wrong under his watch, we have to give him some credit as well.
Goodness gracious me, we've got some credit for Boris Johnson out of Matthew Stadler. There we go. And I'll tell you what, yes, OK, he did have a couple of parties, but, you know, I suppose he could have maybe had some beer and a chicken korma as well. I'll give you the last word, Alex. Come on, I can see you were itching there to respond to Matthew.
There's always some clever clogs that keep saying we live in a parliamentary democracy, therefore that kind of attitude is acceptable, that is to defenestrate an elected prime minister. This is fine in theory, but actually in practice he won a vote of no confidence. This is the kind of thing that I keep repeating to people. This guy won a vote of no confidence in June. He had actually a very good result in the local election. My proof to you that nobody really cared about the drinking, or perhaps the drinking of the prosecutor.
Very quickly, Alex.
It's because he did much better than the Labour Party did outside of London. The Labour Party lost more votes outside of London than the Conservative Party did in London. It was a disaster for the Labour Party, much more than it was for the Tories.
OK, both of you, we could have this all day. We could have this all day, but I'm sorry, I'm going to get shouted at if this lasts any longer, I'm afraid. But you're both going to have to come back and do it again at some point soon. Alex Story, the Bring Back Boris campaign there, of course, and journalist and broadcaster Matthew Stadlen, who is not a Boris hater, just not a massive fan of him. There we go. Thank you both of you for that. What a way to kickstart the show with a fiery debate. But how do you stand on the Boris Johnson legacy issue? GBViews at GBnews.uk. I want to know what you're thinking today. Are you someone who didn't want Boris Johnson to go? Perhaps you think the Conservative Party and the Office of Prime Minister needed someone new, a little bit of a zhuzh-up, as it were. Get in touch. Email me on GBViews at GBnews.uk. You are watching and listening to GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. We've got loads coming your way after the break. We're live from outside Downing Street, where in just under an hour, Liz Truss is expected to give her first speech as Prime Minister, unless it's raining, in which case she goes inside like primary school kids at playtime. We'll also be in Balmoral, where the current and now former Prime Minister Boris Johnson earlier offered his resignation to the Queen. And that's all coming up after this very short break. Don't you dare move.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland, Wales,
And Northern Ireland. On TV.
on radio, and online.
We're proud to be the People's Channel,
Britain's
News channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Loads on today, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to be on Liz Truss watch as she gives her first speech from the steps of Downing Street. That's in just under an hour. Then, of course, we're on Cabinet watch to see who goes in and out of that famous front door, who will make the cut. So it's all happening. It's all going to be live. It's all going to be breaking, and it's all going to be here. But before the break, we were talking a little bit about Boris Johnson's legacy. Lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. We're going to go and squeeze a couple of those in very quickly. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Mr. Lowe. Rather formal, that. I'm normally on first name terms here. Boris has been the best leader we have had for 80 years. Labour are a disgrace. If there was an election tomorrow and Boris stood, the public will vote him back in with a bigger majority. I'm not sure about the bigger majority, but I am inclined to agree with you for a lot of what you've said there. I do think he blows Starmer out the water yet again. Will Liz Truss? That's the question. David says he's only got himself to blame for his downfall and wasted the large majority he was given to him by the electorate and not carried through what he was elected to do on so many things. Was he hamstrung, though, Dave? Was he hamstrung by a mass pandemic, a war in Ukraine? Martin says his main strength was his charisma. Yeah, fair enough. All leaders need charisma to inspire people, maintain positivity, lead and be optimistic about the future. He did all of that, and that's hard to disagree with. He has a very prosperous and lucrative career as an after-dinner speaker awaiting, no doubt. Anyway, Liz Truss has officially been appointed as Prime Minister by the Queen. The Queen, by the way, I thought looked rather well, all things considered, but the former Foreign Secretary travelled to the monarch's Balmoral estate in Scotland earlier today after Boris Johnson had an audience with the Queen to offer his resignation. Now joining me is GB News' political editor, Darren McCaffrey, for the latest. Darren, you're on Truss watch. You've got your brolly out, which means that Truss is probably going to be doing a speech inside. Is she? What's going on?
I'm more on weather watch at the moment than I am on Truss watch, I think, Patrick. It is, yes, raining. I've always wanted to be a weatherman, so it's raining here in Downing Street. Yes, that does have an impact, frankly, on what's going to happen this afternoon, because if it is going to remain like this, though it's pretty intermittent, it's quite difficult to tell, but if it remains like this, I think we're unlikely to see Liz Truss make the speech as the Prime Minister, former Prime Minister, I should say, Boris Johnson did earlier on today here in Downing Street. They have come up with a kind of plan B, if you like, that she'll make that speech indoors if the rain does continue. She's currently in the air, by the way, due to land at 3:49 into RAF Northolt. That is in, 20 minutes' time. We're expecting Liz Truss back in London. She'll then travel by cavalcade with the security teams back here to Downing Street. And then the really tough work of government properly begins after she makes that speech. And this speech, I think, will be pretty important. I mean, it is always quite notable, the speeches Prime Ministers make as they go into Downing Street for the first time. When you think of Boris Johnson's speech, he talked an awful lot about levelling up. Theresa May did something similar, actually, by talking to those that have voted for Brexit back in 2016. It does set the tone, if you like, for her premiership. So it will be a very, very crucial speech. She is then going to appoint a cabinet. We're expecting that to happen this evening. We know some of the names already involved. Kwasi Kwarteng as Chancellor. We know James Cleverly as Foreign Secretary and Suella Braverman as Home Secretary. Well, I say we know that. It's quite heavily rumoured, but we suspect that will be the case. By the way, Therese Coffey, the Work and Pension Secretary, but someone who's tipped to be at least Health Secretary, maybe even Deputy Prime Minister, is already inside number 10 to welcome Liz Truss. So we'll keep an eye on things here, Patrick. As I say, we're expecting her to arrive in, just under an hour's time. We're now expecting that speech, by the way, not at 4:15 as had been planned. Downing Street tell us it's going to be more like 4:40. At the moment, you'd have to say it's probably going to be indoors.
Right, OK, thank you, Darren, for giving us a live update that we're going to have to scrap the entire running order of this show. Darren McCaffrey there, reporting from just outside Downing Street, awaiting Liz Truss's arrival. We may see her, we may not, because it's raining. It's just like a barbecue, isn't it? Darren McCaffrey, our political editor. Right, well, there you go. I can hear the noise of people scurrying around behind me to restructure this entire show as it emerges that Liz Truss might be late to give her speech. But don't worry, ladies and gents, because there's loads to get stuck into. We will be on Cabinet watch. Therese Coffey apparently has entered the building. She may well be Health Secretary. She may well be Deputy Prime Minister. The jokes kind of write themselves with the Health Secretary thing. I, for one, love a Health Secretary that would have appeared unashamedly with a cigar in mouth and red wine down her top. That's my kind of Health Secretary, but still to come here on GB News with me, Patrick Christys. We will be looking at who is most likely to appear as Liz Truss's cabinet, but first, here's all of the news, the latest headlines with Rosie Wright.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 3:32. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. Now, earlier, Buckingham Palace confirmed Boris Johnson had tendered his resignation, which Her Majesty was graciously pleased to accept. Mr Johnson and his wife Carrie spent almost 40 minutes with the monarch before leaving Balmoral. The Scottish Government plans to introduce emergency legislation to freeze rents and rail fares as part of a major plan to deal with the cost of living crisis. Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon also announced a temporary hold on evictions and said an energy strategy would be published in the coming year. Official sources have told GBNews Albanian criminal gangs are risking a major tragedy by pushing small boats into the English Channel in poor weather. Despite deteriorating conditions, Ministry of Defence figures show 188 people crossed into UK waters yesterday. Today, at least 3 boats have been intercepted. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex are in Germany for a reception to mark the one-year countdown to the Invictus Games, which will be held in Dusseldorf. Prince Harry founded the Games to help aid the rehabilitation of military personnel and veterans by giving them the challenge of competing in sporting events similar to the Paralympics. TV, online and DAB Plus radio will be keeping you up to date here on GB News. Don't go anywhere. Patrick will be back in a moment.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you.
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV.
On radio.
and online.
We're proud to be the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Yes, welcome back, everybody. Now, we have a new Prime Minister, but who are the winners and losers likely to be as Liz Truss puts the finishing touches on her new cabinet lineup? Who could find themselves in new seats around the cabinet table, and who is going to be ushered out of the door? The smart money is on Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng becoming the new Chancellor of the Exchequer. Mr Kwarteng only took up his first cabinet role last year, but has been a long-term ally of Ms Truss's since they entered the Commons together back in 2010. Meanwhile, Suella Braverman, the current Attorney General, is widely tipped to be the next Home Secretary. James Cleverly is thought to be in line as our new Foreign Sec, and it's understood that Truss's long-term ally Therese Coffey could be appointed Deputy Prime Minister as well as Health Secretary. I personally cannot wait for that, putting her right at the centre of power, and indeed apparently she is already at the centre of power because she's already in Downing Street. There we go. As for those who are leaving the stage, Priti Patel announced her resignation last night. Nadine Dorries has signalled that she isn't prepared to stay on as well. We're going to get stuck into all of this, and I'm joined firstly by our very own Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, thank you very much. Now, you've got loads in your brief, really, so we can rattle through a few different potential appointments. Unfortunately, we've not got a huge amount of time to do it, right? Shall we start with Home Secretary? Suella Braverman, smart money's on her.
Yes, and all of the speculation, of course, in the weeks running up to this was that Priti Patel is not going to stay in office no matter what. So she clearly decided to jump before she was pushed. So Suella Braverman, we believe, is in line, is the hot favourite to take over that job. Then Justice, of course, as well. Dominic Raab at the moment is the Justice Secretary. Again, that being tipped as a post that could go to Brandon Lewis. Very important as well, of course, about sentencing of offenders and alike as well. Whole life terms, when whole life terms should mean whole life terms for someone who's offended. And then the security minister, we're told, may go to Tom Tugendhat. We'll wait to see if that's the case. That would be an important posting with all the security issues that are going on. And what would that involve? Would it be security that really is focused on what our sort of spy agencies are doing? I would imagine so. But there's also other issues related to the likes of the Ukraine war, which, of course, then we're talking about the Defence Secretary. Yes. Ben Wallace, we are not expecting him to be replaced, according to the briefings that have been coming out from Liz Truss's camp. And that would make sense, because we are in the middle of a war in Ukraine. A lot for Ben Wallace to do, and he's been roundly and I think rightly praised for what he's managed to do as Defence Secretary.
Yeah, so he's got a pedigree there in the sense that he's been doing the job. There is a war on, and he seems to have done that job quite well.
Very respected amongst the military.
Very respected. Tom Tugendhat has got a military pedigree, so security, that kind of writes itself. What qualifies Suella Braverman, in your opinion, to be potential, anyway, new Home Secretary?
Well, she's Attorney General at the moment, for a start, so, you know, she's immersed in that world and from a legal background. So I think, you know, she's certainly been making the right noises in terms of trying to get to grips with the Channel crisis. Of course, both Liz Truss and now Suella Braverman, if she is confirmed as the Home Secretary, will be, we're told, wedded to the Rwanda policy, which is going nowhere anytime soon, it seems.
Quite literally, actually,
we've got this court case on for another 4 days. Then there'll be a reserve judgment. There's a related court case taking place in October. So it could be sometime in November before we get any resolution of whether the Rwanda policy itself is legal.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's almost like you're a professional at this, Mark, because when we come back shortly after, we're going to go to Liam Halligan, by the way, to get the economic update, but we're going to be talking to a former Border Force officer who's going to be telling us exactly what they want from our new Home Secretary, because, of course, it's non-stop in the Channel, isn't it?
I like to help where I can, Patrick.
Oh, you like to help where you can. You do your bit. Mark White doing his bit here on GBNews. Cheers, Mark. I'll chat to you later. Our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, is at Downing Street. Downing Street is just full of GBNews staff at the minute. There he is. And he's got his brolly out. He can maybe help Liz Truss with hers later on in case she has to nip inside because of the weather. Who thought it might be raining in Britain in autumn? But, Liam, what's the latest when it comes to our Chancellor?
We're still waiting for confirmation, of course. Pretty much a nailed uncertainty among most observers that the new Chancellor will be Kwasi Kwarteng. He entered the Commons, as you said, Patrick, in 2010 with Liz Truss. He was born in the UK in 1975 of Ghanaian parentage. His professional parents, one a barrister, one an economist, came to the UK as students in the 1960s. Kwasi Kwarteng, he has already run the business Office of State. He's been a business secretary. He's focused on energy. And of course, the main thing he's going to have to grapple with is that energy support package. A support package, Patrick, that we're expecting to cost upward of £100 billion, more than furlough, doubling UK government borrowing at a stroke.
Yeah. Absolutely. And one of the big questions I think a lot of people are asking at the minute, Liam, is this just kicking the can down the road for people? Because it's a blanket statement, isn't it? So if you've got 10 bedrooms and a swimming pool, your bill will be capped as well as the same people if they're on benefits or something like that, you know?
That certainly is the big choice that Liz Truss faces in conjunction with her Chancellor, who we're expecting to be Kwasi Kwarteng. Does she give blanket coverage, a cap on all energy bills, capping them, we expect, at the level of the April 2022 Ofgem energy price cap, around £2,000 a year for the typical households? Because as you say, if you live in a really big house with lots of bedrooms, you're going to end up getting a lot more help from the state than if you live in a smaller house. On the other hand, I do think there will be additional benefits, additional assistance for more vulnerable families, maybe those in lower council tax bands or those who receive particular benefits. But it's a really big conundrum here, Patrick. We know it's going to be extremely expensive. We know financial markets are keeping an eye on what the British government is saying it will spend. Sterling has been looking a little bit shaky. So all in all, a pretty big challenge for the first ever Black Briton to hold one of the great offices of state. That's Kwasi Kwarteng, expected to be confirmed as Chancellor.
Lovely stuff, Liam. You'll be bringing us the latest, of course, as we remain on Cabinet Watch throughout the day right here on GB News Live, putting the live, really, in GB News Live. That was our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan. Now, yesterday, you may remember, we did a Twitter poll, and we asked you what we thought, I should say, was the most burning issue, the pressing issue in Liz Truss's inbox, and basically immigration, essentially, emerged as the top one. So I thought, well, why don't we actually speak to a former Border Force chief in the shape of Kevin Saunders to find out what he actually wants from our incoming Home Secretary, suspected to be Suella Braverman. Kevin, thank you very much. I want you to tell me and to tell the nation exactly what you want the incoming Home Secretary to do better and to do differently, because our viewers want to know, our listeners want to know.
Good afternoon, Patrick. Well, the first thing is Liz Truss has promised extra staff for Border Force. I believe she promised 1,800. That doesn't touch it. We need at least an extra 5,000 staff for Border Force. We need to have a look at what's going on at the Channel from a management point of view, because it doesn't appear to be being managed very well by Border Force. Perhaps it's time to get rid of the threat commander. He promised that he was going to stop the Channel migrants coming across, and he's failed. So perhaps it's time to replace him. Perhaps it's also time to find a Border Force chief, we haven't got one at the moment, who's actually done the job, has actually been in immigration and understands the job. Unfortunately, we've had a retired admiral, a chief constable, and a jolly good civil servant. None of those people are Border Force people and don't understand the business. So that's what Suella Braverman, if she is going to be appointed, needs to do, because the rest will follow. Get Border Force staff, get immigration staff at the top of the business, and we'll see some changes straight away.
What about changing the attitude and confronting the public attitude a little bit on this? Because you get a lot of these bleeding heart liberals who say, oh, come on, every single person coming over is a troubled refugee. We're just reading today that, Albanian gangs are running the show over there, pushing people out in bad weather. The RNLI have acted, some would say, as an Uber service for illegal immigrants. I mean, does our incoming Home Secretary have to be cruel to be kind?
Yes, basically she does. We are talking about having to borrow £130 billion to keep us warm over the next 2 winters. With that sort of expenditure, we can't be taking thousands and thousands and thousands of refugees. We have to house them, we have to feed them, we have to look after them. We can't do it. No. Rwanda is the answer. That's what we need to do. And I hope that the court case that's going on at the moment will say that what we're doing is legal.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I've got to be honest with you, as much as I'm loving all of this breaking news that's taking place at the minute, part of me can't wait for it to die down so people like you and I can get stuck into the granular detail of this Rwanda deal and talk about these flights taking off. But I think you made a series of very good points there. It would make sense to put someone in charge of Border Force who's actually been in charge of Border Force before, as opposed to a civil servant. It would make sense to try to change the public perception when it comes to exactly the people who are coming across the Channel. and make the case that when we're cash-strapped and essentially nationally skint as we are, then really can we afford to be forking out what is millions of pounds a day and set to rise for some people coming across the channel, pushed out there in many cases by Albanian human traffickers. Thank you very much. Former Border Force Chief there, Kevin Saunders, doing a rather good job of auditioning for the next role, one would have thought. But that's what's going to be on Suella Braverman's mind. She could do well to listen to him. But the current Business Secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng, is now widely tipped as well to become Chancellor. Whoever Liz Truss appoints will undoubtedly have a huge challenge on their hands in tackling this current cost of living crisis. Two big issues for you, and we're hitting them both right now. First one, of course, was the immigration issue, was the Channel issue. We've done that. So we want to focus now on the cost of living, as soaring energy bills have become an extreme worry for many. I mean, it's unbelievable. I'm waiting to be sitting here at GB News as we gradually dim the lights a little bit and I end up reporting by candlelight. But with widespread calls from households and businesses for government assistance, how will it be dealt with? Well, it's been reported that new measures will be announced on Thursday, so day after tomorrow, which could include a cap on wholesale gas costs to freeze energy bills, so a freezing of energy bills. But what should Truss and her new Chancellor implement to help people and get a grip of these rising costs? Is that right to do? Are we kicking the can down the road? Will my kids and your grandkids be paying for a short-term approach to these energy bills? Anyway, with me now is the former CEO of Energy UK, so someone who should know their onions, basically, is Angela Knight. Angela, thank you very much. I'm concerned that this is more short-termism. It sounds great. People hear freeze energy bills, not grandma freezing to death. But actually, what's going on? Are we going to pay for this for generations?
Yes, we probably are, because we're in an extraordinary situation at the moment in which, gas prices and the wholesale market are not only very high, but are likely to stay high for some time. We could be looking at a really uncertain situation and a high price situation, not for 3 months or 6 months, but more like 18 months and 2 years. So, yes, you're right. It's going to be big money for the short term in order to just keep, really, wheels of industry running and ourselves warm.
Yeah, and some people are jumping to the criticism of this, as yet not even a policy, actually, because they're saying, well, if I've got a 10-bedroom house with a heated swimming pool and a gym and a sauna and goodness knows what else, then I'm still going to have my bills capped, but someone who's maybe lower down the economic spectrum will also have their bills capped. Should it be right that that's the case? I mean, should maybe essentially the poor have their bills capped and the rich not?
Well, you are right. There is definitely a case for what they call tapering. But let me just pick into a little bit of the detail, because I think it's worthwhile doing.
Yeah.
What is being capped is actually the price per therm of gas and the price per kilowatt hour, of electricity. So if you've got a big house, you actually are going to be using more electricity and more gas than you are if you're in a small house. So, it's kind of an estimate, an average, a typical, or whatever the phraseology is, of that bill. But it's the unit price that's being capped. So you will get a differential anyway. However, I think that the real point that is going to determine whether it's something for everybody or whether there's something far more for those in the lower incomes, and if you don't fall into that bracket, you've got to just suck it up, will be how quickly you can put a complicated scheme in place for this October. And we're not a long way away from it. So I suspect that it's actually degree of complexity and the length of time to get it in there, put those two together, and that's going to be one of the key things which denotes whether it's kind of rough justice, something for everybody, or whether it's much more tailored.
Do you think there's any way of Liz Truss invoking some kind of blitz spirit? We keep hearing people talking about how this is the toughest time since Winston Churchill. In fact, Tobias Ellwood said that. He knows a thing or two about his military history. We've had a lot of people coming on saying, she needs to invoke Margaret Thatcher. Indeed, she's tried to invoke Margaret Thatcher herself by wearing one of those silly rabbit hats and standing on a tank for a little bit. But actually, do you think she does need to invoke a little bit of this spirit? Because people are going to be taking a massive hit in the pocket, and the only way people can make that palatable is if they think they're doing some kind of mass national good by doing so.
Well, I think you've got a very fair point. I mean, specifically on energy, I just remember, when I was a kid, my dad would say, well, if you're cold, put on a cardigan. And when I left the lights on, he said, what do you think this is? Blackpool illuminations. Now, we've all been there. And so there is an element that we have to just kind of think what we're using ourselves and take some sensible steps. So I absolutely buy that. But I also agree with you that it's a very difficult time. We've got a lot of things, of which energy is one. We've got inflation. We're still in recovery from the pandemic. We've got problems with social care. We've got problems with the health service. There's a whole big thing there. If you are going to pull the country together, which is what she's got to do, you've got to have your plan. You're absolutely right. There's a couple of quick policies you've got to put in. Your plan. So we all know, A, where we're going, B, that there is going to be an economic upturn, the sort of boost for production, boost for industry that's being talked about, and we can see when the good times are going to arrive.
Yeah, exactly. You hit the nail on the head there when you said about that line about it being like Blackpool illuminations. That was ringing into my ears. I think I've actually turned into my own mother because I've got a partner who it seems intent on leaving every single light in the place on, and I now have decided that I'm going to go round just basically shouting, turning all of them off and making a massive deal out of it as well. I can't just turn a light off and that be that. I've now got to make some kind of performance about the whole thing. Oh, another one goes off. But anyway, there we go. Angela, thank you very, very much. Angela Knight there, former CEO of Energy UK. Whizzing you through essentially Liz Truss's announcement, or potential announcement, that she's going to cap energy bills. What do you make of that? Do you welcome it, or do you think, yes, again, this is stuff we're going to have to pay for down the line? Where's all this money coming from? But you have been getting in touch in your droves this afternoon. And here's loads of what you've been saying. We've had Paul get in touch. Paul, thank you very much. I know you're a regular emailer. He says, my son has just bought a house in Lincoln. We don't want him to end up paying for the mistakes today. And I think that's a concern for a lot of people, actually, Paul, which is, seriously, what are their kids going to do? What are the grandkids going to do? Should we suck it up now? But then I suppose when those gas bills do drop and those energy bills do drop, maybe you change your mind. Andrea's been in touch. Gas, paying for it is the title of this email. So here we go. I think it needs to be paid off like a war chest. So what if the kids and grandkids pay for it? We only just paid off a lot of other things in the past. Dave's been on, another Dave. One thing it would help if people in low-paid jobs use card top-ups. Also, we have had Karen has been on, who makes a very valid point when people invoke the Blitz spirit, right? Which is just pretty simple. We're not actually in the Blitz, right? So I think that's a valid point. Now, when we were in the Blitz, she says, we had a more united country. And we don't necessarily have a united country now. And that's a really important point, actually. A really important point, which is this country at the minute is pretty disunited. I do think a lot of the kind of wokey mob are doing their best to rip us apart limb from limb. But actually, can we even invoke the Blitz spirit anymore when everyone disagrees with everything about everything these days? GBviews at gbnews.uk. We have got a massive, massive couple of hours coming your way because we're on Liz Truss watch, first and foremost. Liz Truss, our new Prime Minister, is set to touch down back in England today, now, as in now, I think. Have we got live pictures? I think we've got live pictures of that. She's expected at RAF Northolt very, very shortly. I believe we might be able to show you some pictures of that at some point very, very soon. If you're watching us on television, of course. We're going to be seeing her touch down there and then drive to Downing Street, where, if it isn't raining, as we understand it, she's going to do a speech. That's the runway. There we go. We've got it. She's going to be doing a speech from outside Downing Street. If it is raining, no one, the full might of the British state, could not muster up a gazebo or an umbrella. No, she's going to have to go inside and do the speech from there. Can I just say to you, we are bringing you pictures now of RAF Northolt, which is the runway, and that is the plane, ladies and gentlemen, with Liz Truss on it, our new Prime Minister, touching down. And she will go from there to Downing Street by motorcade, via motorcade, where she will deliver her speech. If you're just joining us, that's the plane carrying Liz Truss. She's just been to Balmoral and been permitted to form a government by Her Majesty the Queen, who actually I thought looked rather well, considering earlier on the Majesty accepted Boris Johnson's resignation and then gave Liz Truss official permission to form a government. Liz Truss then flew back from Balmoral and just touched down there, as you can see if you're watching us on television, at RAF Northolt. That is the images of Liz Truss arriving. If you are listening to us on radio, we are currently seeing the plane just touch down, a rather light aircraft anyway, touching down. And Liz Truss will get out of this and then get into a motorcade and hot-foot it over to Downing Street, RAF Northolt, not a million miles away, of course. And we will be expecting at 20 to 5, so just over 40 minutes' time, we will be expecting to see Liz Truss make her first speech as Prime Minister of this country. And then, as if that wasn't enough for you, because we were bringing you that live, we're going to be then on Cabinet Watch. As we understand it, Therese Coffey, expected potentially to become Health Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister, is already in Downing Street. She'll be greeting Liz Truss when she gets off this plane and then does get to Downing Street. Also, Kwasi Kwarteng, we're expecting to become Chancellor. Liam Halligan, our economics and business editor, is on the scene for us to give you the very latest on that. We're expecting a whole raft full of announcements, so you can't really take your eyes off it. It's going to be a very, very lively show right here on GB News. That was Liz Truss's plane touching down to take her to Downing Street very, very shortly, where she will give her first speech. You are, of course, watching GB News Live with me here on Patrick Christys. Still lots to come, as we've been mentioning. Liz Truss's first speech as Prime Minister will be crossing live to Downing Street as well to give you all of the very latest. It's all kicking off here. That is Liz Truss's plane arriving. Liz Truss currently at RAF Northolt ahead of her first speech as Prime Minister, but we're going to go and give you your much-needed weather, because today of all days the weather is very important. If it stays sunny and it stays bright, then Liz Truss will be giving a speech from outside Downing Street. If, unfortunately, it does start tipping it down, then she will go inside. We'll endeavour to bring you the very, very latest. But I tell you what, before you weather, you can have your news. Here it is.
Patrick, thank you. Liz Truss has officially been appointed as Prime Minister by Her Majesty the Queen at Balmoral today. The former Foreign Secretary travelled to the monarch's estate in Scotland earlier today after Boris Johnson had an audience with her, the Queen, to offer his resignation. Well, you can see these are the pictures of Liz Truss arriving in Balmoral. And as Patrick was saying just now, we're expecting Liz Truss, whose plane there is taxiing on the runway at Northolt, which is, of course, the airfield that is used by dignitaries, politicians in the west of London. It's a military airfield. Coming in from Balmoral, having seen Her Majesty the Queen at her estate in Scotland, taxiing along the runway, and as Patrick was saying, will then be going on to make a speech. Due to the inclement weather, we're hoping that that can be conducted inside, possibly outside. It does look like there's a glint of sunshine on the fuselage of the aeroplane at the moment. But as soon as our new Prime Minister, the UK's 56th Prime Minister, and indeed the third female Prime Minister, emerges from that plane at Northolt, she will be giving a speech upon landing. And as you were hearing, she will then be taken in a cavalcade along the A40, probably, into the west of London and straight to Downing Street, where she will then be giving yet another speech to the party faithful and indeed to the cameras. Well, I can tell you the Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner, says the Conservatives have failed to provide a sound solution on energy. Here's what she said.
Liz Truss' plan seems to be to adopt Labour's position of freezing the energy cap at the moment so people are not paying more, but to put that burden back onto the taxpayers and to increase debt. What Labour has said is that we should have a windfall tax on gas and oil companies that pays for this freeze, but we need a longer term solution to look at renewables, to retrofit homes, to make sure that our energy is self-sufficient and that our homes are as energy efficient as they possibly can be. There's been no plan from the Conservatives.
All those are the latest news headlines. Lots happening at the moment, both at Northolt and in Westminster. Let's hand you back now to Patrick.
This is GB News. Welcome back. I'm going to bring you the live pictures now from the runway at RAF Northolt, where Liz Truss has just touched down. Her plane has landed flying back from Balmoral, where, of course, she got permission from the Queen to form a government. It is another momentous day for Britain. We've seen the departure of one of the UK's most popular prime ministers of all time. Boris Johnson did give his goodbye speech. Too much fanfare, although I suppose that's what you get from a heavily hand-picked crowd, but also a lot of you as well. And we can see now RAF Northolt there. Liz Truss touching down, and we are expecting her, in fact, I think we can see her very, very shortly, getting off of that plane. She will get into a motorcade and drive to Downing Street, where we are expecting her to give a speech. If the weather at least stays like this, which does look OK in RAF Northolt, she'll be giving a speech from the steps of Downing Street, outlining essentially her vision for the country, one would have thought. Also, later on throughout the show, we'll be bringing you the very latest when it comes to cabinet appointments. So Liz Truss will be doing that. We'll be bringing you that live here on GB News. It won't take too long for her to get from RAF Northolt to Downing Street. In fact, we're expecting it now to just be around 37 minutes before Liz Truss is indeed speaking to you. So make sure you stay with us here at GB News for the very latest on all of that. A momentous day, of course, in British political history, in British national history. What can we expect her to do to ease the cost of living crisis? How will she deal with this immigration issue? And what about our taxes? There's also the small matter of the war in Ukraine that she's going to have to deal with. I will be getting expert analysis on this from right across the UK. I want to go to your views, but as we are, if you're watching us on television or indeed online, playing you images there of Liz Truss's plane touching down at RAF Northolt before she goes to Downing Street. A man who is just at Downing Street at the minute is our very own Darren McCaffrey, our political editor, who is going to have a very, very busy day. Darren, I believe you can join us now. There he is. And the brolly's gone away, which means one thing and one thing only, Darren, which I believe is that Liz Truss may well very shortly be about to do a street from actually outside Downing Street. Talk to me.
Indeed, indeed. I promised I wasn't a weatherman, but I'll bring you the latest weather, and it has stopped raining here in Downing Street, and it looks like it might not rain anytime soon. And that means that behind me, just behind those other guys, they will probably set up the podium relatively soon, and we will hear from Liz Truss as she enters Downing Street for the first time as Prime Minister. We're expecting that at around 4:40-ish, we're told, Patrick. So what, 35 minutes or so. It depends how long it takes to get from RAF Northolt, what the traffic's like. But of course, she's got that motorcade to see away the traffic on this Tuesday afternoon and try and get here as quickly as possible. I think we saw some steps get off the plane a little bit earlier. So I suspect she is, and I think we can see some of those, some of the armoured Land Rovers there on the right-hand side. So it looks like she will be leaving that airport pretty soon. When she gets here, really, really important moment. I cannot overemphasise how important this speech is, the first speech the Prime Minister makes in Downing Street. We can remember Boris Johnson's 3 years ago when she talked an awful about levelling up and getting Brexit done. Remember Theresa May's, actually, back in 2016 when she talked about trying to listen to those voters who felt maligned by British politics and about Brexit. As for Liz Truss, though, her big speech is going to have to address some of the big issues facing Britain today, not least of all that if you listen to the Bank of England, we're hurtling towards a protracted recession that could start as early as the end of this year. But more pressing, Patrick, is that issue of energy price rises and what precisely the government is going to do to tackle that. And you could add a whole plethora of other issues, whether it's the Northern Ireland Protocol, the migration channel crisis in the English Channel, whether it is the NHS and the difficulties it's likely to face this winter post-pandemic, and you could go on and on and on. There is little doubt Liz Truss is facing the most difficult in-trade that any politician, any Prime Minister has had to face really since 1979. And then when she makes that speech here, she will go into number 10. She'll go get clapped by the Downing Street staff, welcome them. Many of them will be working with her in the months and years to come. And then she'll go to the Cabinet office and she'll be sat down by the Cabinet Secretary and taken through some pretty brutal stuff, i.e. the nuclear launch codes, a security briefing of the highest possible sensitivity, and then she'll set about that task of appointing her cabinet. And as you've rightly remarked, Theresa Coffey is already inside Downing Street, a close political ally of Liz Truss. The expectation is that she could well be Health Secretary in a couple of hours' time. She may even be Deputy Prime Minister.
Yes, indeed. So Therese Coffey's already in. You've spent this entire time so far just being photobombed by Robert Peston behind you, I believe there. Darren, he's clearly a fan of GB News. He's been itching to get on the channel ever since, but there you are. So, yeah, he'll be one of many. There will be a massive press pack there. Just run me through some of the cabinet positions expected to be filled later on, Darren, because we are, if you are just joining us, by the way, if you're watching us on the television, pictures there, live images from RAF Northolt as the steps come down from Liz Truss's plane. A slight concern for everyone who's expecting Liz Truss to give a speech outside Downing Street, just where our political editor Darren McCaffrey is, because I'm just checking on my phone the length of time it's going to take to drive from RAF Northolt to Downing Street, and it says, and I'm quoting now according to Google Maps, that traffic is busier than usual at this particular time, and it might take upwards of an hour. But that's why you've got a motorcade, of course. So the Blues and Twos will go on, and Liz Truss, our new Prime Minister, we'll be going to Downing Street shortly. We'll bring you the live stuff from there. But, Darren, appointing a cabinet will be the next order of the day. Who are the runners and riders at the moment, Darren?
Just before I do that, Patrick, I don't know if we can cut to another live shot away from me, but just at the other end of this street, you may have saw this morning, actually, when Boris Johnson was making a speech. Quite a few MPs, maybe upwards of about 50, 60 MPs turned up to listen to that speech. The same seems to be happening today. I can see people like Peter Bone, stood by Jake Berry, and others clearly forming at that end of the street. They will be here when Liz Truss arrives to listen to what she has to say. And a bit like what we saw earlier, we're going to see some of her members of staff, I'm sure, as well. In terms of the cabinet, let's talk about that. Kwasi Kwarteng, almost certainly going to be the new Chancellor of the Exchequer. He is another very close political ally of Liz Truss. He is going to have a hell of a task, isn't he, in the weeks and months to come. We're expecting actually quite a significant fiscal event with particularly those tax reverses on national insurance that Liz Truss has already set out, and indeed on corporation tax from that new Chancellor. Also, we're looking at James Cleverly, who's currently the Education Secretary, moving in as Foreign Secretary, taking over Liz Truss's old job. Suella Braverman is likely to end up in the Home Office, taking over from Priti Patel, who resigned last night, resigned rather than being sacked today. And then it all gets a little bit fuzzy in some regards. Yes, we talked about Therese Coffey, and health. There's lots of suggestions that the Northern Ireland job, must be said, not somewhat the most desirable job in the cabinet, has been offered to 2 or 3 people, and they have somewhat turned them down. People like Sajid Javid and others. Where will they potentially end up? We don't know. Nadine Dorries has gone from the cabinet. She's already handed in her resignation. Who could get culture? There's talk that it could be Kebby Badenoch, for example. Will Penny Borden be in the cabinet? And that's another big crucial question in all these appointments, Patrick, is just where are these appointees going to come from? There are 2 trains of thought. First of all, some of those close to Liz Truss says that she needs to be surrounded by people she likes, who are on board with her programme, people, frankly, that she can trust. But others are saying, well, you know what, she didn't do as well as expected in the membership vote. She wasn't the most popular politician amongst MPs to get into the final 2. Does she need to reach out into the party? Does she need to get Boris Johnson supporters on board, Rishi Sunak supporters in the cabinet in order to try and end some of those fractious relationships and divisions that we've seen within the Conservative Party? And that will be a really, really interesting signal, I think, we'll see from Liz Truss and this new government in those cabinet appointees in the hours to come. Interestingly, we think that even though lots of them have already been told in advance, Patrick, via the old-fashioned telephone, that many of them will still actually walk up the streets and go in to see Liz Truss in number 10 to officially be told of their cabinet position. And we are expecting it to happen pretty quickly this evening, where the expectation is that the cabinet will meet for the first time tomorrow morning.
Great stuff. Look, Darren, thank you so much. Darren McCaffrey there, our political editor, who is at Downing Street for us in front of the most famous front door in Britain, awaiting the arrival of Liz Truss, who is, if you're watching us on telly or online, of course, just about to get off that plane that you can see at RAF Northolt. If you are listening to us on radio, there's a plane on a runway at RAF Northolt, and Liz Truss is about to get off it. She'll be getting into a motorcade, which, as we can see, is several rather large vehicles, and whizzing it down to Downing Street for her first speech. But joining me now is Nigel Nelson, the political editor of the Sunday Mirror and Sunday People. Thank you very much, Nigel, for joining us. This first speech is going to be really, really important for Liz Truss. She is not what some people would call a natural orator, but she has to unite not only her party, but also the country. What does she need to say?
Well, first of all, she should not be sort of clutching an invisible tea tray as she did yesterday when the result was announced. So she does come across as a bit wooden, and I think she's going to have to get over that. The trouble with the Downing Street doorstep speeches when a new Prime Minister comes in is they do tend to be full of a few platitudes. You'll remember Theresa May, it was a country that works for everyone. Margaret Thatcher famously came out with where there is discord, may we bring harmony. She was quoting Francis of Assisi. I'm not sure we'll have any more classical references given that we've had Cincinnatus today from the Prime Minister. So the chances are Liz Truss will steer clear of something like that. What one would hope to hear is a bit more about this plan to curb energy prices. It does look like she's talking about a price freeze that'll be in the region of £2,500. People will get their £400 that was promised. So that brings it back to the kind of level that bills were in April.
Yeah. Do you think there's anything that she can really say, though, Nigel, to really appease a lot of people? I mean, some people have already made their minds up that Liz Truss is going to be a disaster and that the Conservative Party needs to go before she's even actually outlined what she's going to do.
Yeah, and I think that the key thing there really is how she forms her cabinet. What she really ought to be doing is trying to bring people in from all wings of the party if she has any hope of uniting it. She ended the parliamentary part of the contest with only a third of Tory MPs supporting her. If they'd had their way, Rishi Sunak would be leader today. In fact, I've just seen him down in the Commons in Portcullis House having a coffee because he's got nothing to do at the moment. So she does start a bit on the back foot. If she brings the right people in, that'd be fine. But certainly, from what Darren has just been saying, we're looking at her key supporters getting top jobs. So the only way she's going to bring other people in from outside is in the junior ranks.
Yeah, but I suppose at the minute, when you look at the fact that the country is almost on a war footing, I suppose you could argue that Liz Truss needs to be as well. And during times of crisis, we've got several at the minute, you would bring your key allies around you, wouldn't you? And I suppose that's maybe what she's going to do. A lot of Conservative voters, from what I'm hearing anyway, are looking at some of the potential names being wheeled out in this cabinet, and they're saying that in their mind it looks, quote, pretty sound.
Well, I mean, I think it's not so much bringing key supporters online, Patrick. It's more about finding the best people for the job. And that she could do if she moved outside the various wings of the party. Now, we're looking at, for instance, Therese Coffey as health secretary.
Can I just interrupt you on that, Nigel? Sorry to interrupt. But I think we might be about to see some movement shortly of that motorcade from Liz Truss. But Nigel, I want to get you on that issue specifically about Therese Coffey. The rumours are health secretary. Now, Therese Coffey is arguably most famous for the infamous cigar and wine down the front of the top image. Now, I've said it before, I'll say it again, that's my kind of health secretary, Nigel. I don't know about you, but I don't mind a little bit of that. But do you think that she's right for that particular job?
Well, I'm not sure she is, but then she was previously touted to be chief whip, and I don't think she was right for that job either. That she was Liz Truss's campaign manager. I'd have thought Deputy Prime Minister, she may get that title anyway, give her Deputy Prime Minister certainly, but she seems to be angling for her own department as well. I think Deputy Prime Minister is enough on its own.
Yeah, indeed. Nigel, I'll tell you what, can I ask you a quick favour? Please stay on the line for us. We're just going to bring in Mark White. We're going to head back to you, Nigel Nelson there, the political editor of the Sunday Mirror and Sunday People. I just want to bring in Mark White, our Home and Security editor, because we were talking there about the fact that Liz Truss's plane has just touched down at RAF Northolt. She will get into a motorcade and drive to Downing Street. I must be honest with you, it looks like it's rather a long way according to my Google Maps. How does she do it?
It is. Well, the Metropolitan Police are actually expert at this. They've got a team called a Special Escort Group. Now, anybody that lives around central London will have seen them many times before. They're a group of police motorcyclists. You were talking about putting the blues and twos. They don't actually use sirens, they use whistles.
Yeah, which is, I always find quite strange, because I thought there was a rave. The first time, when I first moved to London, I thought, oh, here we go, there's a party on.
It's quite disconcerting, but they do that because it gets instant attention of the motorists. They're really, really good at just shooting right ahead. There's normally no more than about 6 of these bikes, but they'll escort the motorcade, which of course includes now the Prime Minister in their vehicle, and there'll be another couple of vehicles that are there, one for her staff, another for close security detail as well. And the Special Escort Group, they're all armed officers, completely trained and able to deal with any potential eventuality. They'll shoot ahead to the various junctions. So you'll see a bike zipping at fast speed up to the next set of traffic lights. They'll stop the vehicle using their whistles, stop vehicles coming from different roadways to then allow that motorcade to just keep sweeping down the road. And they do that all the way in. And you'd be surprised at how quickly they can get the vehicles there. It might still be a few minutes.
Well, it looks that way. I'm not being funny, but it does, because at the minute we can see, we're just showing you images, if you're watching us on the telly there, of that front door at Downing Street. Now, the famous plinth, the podium, whatever you want to call it, has just been plonked outside 10 Downing Street. Banks of media, the world's media, descending onto Downing Street there, ready and waiting for Liz Truss, who, as far as we're aware, has not actually got off this plane yet at RAF Northolt. Supposedly is going to be delivering her maiden speech as Prime Minister. Well, it was supposed to be in 20 minutes' time. Mark, there's no way that's going to happen, surely.
Well, I mean, as I say, you'll be surprised at how quickly they can...
I would be surprised.
They will zip through that traffic pretty quickly. This is something, of course, now. As Foreign Secretary, she did get some kind of escort, nothing of the level she will get now. But that is nothing compared to what we see with the Beast and the US President of the United States and his massive motorcade. We're still confined to normally about 3 or 4 vehicles maximum, and then the motorcyclists. But as I say, they do this day in, day out. They've got to be aware. There's obviously a heightened potential security risk. We've seen before, I think it was when Boris Johnson was actually going to the palace, to Buckingham Palace, to kiss the hand of the Queen.
Yes.
Some protesters jumped out in the mall in front of the Special Escort Group. They jumped off their bikes, managed to wrestle these people, I think they were climate change protesters, to the side to allow then Boris Johnson and his motorcade to get to Buckingham Palace. So they're very good at this. Anybody can do it, they can do it. Of course, it'd be quicker with a helicopter.
I was just about to say, it would be quicker with a helicopter, but there we are. We are looking now at pictures of Downing Street. Again, just to emphasise, the full might of the British state has apparently not managed to get Liz Truss a gazebo. And so, therefore, if it does rain, then that plinth that we're seeing there, and presumably a large chunk of the press and the media who are awaiting eagerly Liz Truss's maiden speech as our Prime Minister are going to have to find a way inside. We'll bring you the latest on all of that as we get it. Just a quick summary if you are joining us. Liz Truss has now touched back down. She went and met the Queen earlier on and was given permission to form a government. She flew then from Aberdeen back down to RAF Northolt. The motorcade is ready and waiting for Liz Truss to get in it and bomb it back down to 10 Downing Street, where she will give, as it currently stands, because it's not raining, a speech from just outside that famous black front door, which we will bring you live here, followed by live cabinet appointments. You can't take your eyes off it, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure that you stay with me, because coming up, we will hopefully be giving you Liz Truss's first speech as Prime Minister. Don't you dare move.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales
And Northern Ireland. On TV.
On radio.
and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's
News Channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Welcome back. It's all go here at GB News Live. That breaking news is, of course, that Liz Truss not only has become Prime Minister, but has now touched down and is in a motorcade whizzing her way off to Downing Street, where we will be bringing you her maiden speech as Prime Minister live from outside that famous black front door. But the biggest test of Liz Truss's premiership will easily be on Thursday, when she's expected to announce help for households with their energy bills. But what about the thousands of small businesses all over the country who don't have protection on this energy price cap? We still don't know if they'll have their energy bills frozen at the current level. We thought that we'd send Paul Hawkins to go and speak to one cafe owner in the town of Downham Market. Why Downham Market? I can hear you shouting at your televisions and radios. Well, of course, that is Liz Truss's constituency in southwest of Norfolk. Let's hear what Paul found out for us.
This business has been going on for 11 years, and for the last 6 months we've had the most difficult times of the last 11 years. We had to get rid of 3 of our staff members because we can't afford to anymore pay their wages. Living standards are so high, and they can't afford to live on the wages they have, and we can't afford to raise them because our energy prices are huge. We just don't know what to do, so I hope the new government, Liz Truss, can help us with in the next few months and can get us out of this this crisis.
So how could she help you?
Well, first of all, a cap on energy prices, a freeze,
because they're talking about a freeze for households,
exactly.
But you want a freeze for businesses, small businesses.
Freeze for businesses as well, because currently I have shown you my energy bill for the last month, £4,000, £1,000 a week. That is ridiculous. That is ridiculous. We can't afford to. I am not taking any money home these days, so we're just trying to survive. And as I said, this business has been going on for 11 years, and we are thinking of shutting down.
How will you feel if you have to close it? I mean, there's obviously an economic impact, but how will you feel having put so much energy into it?
Shut it. I would feel awful because I love being here. As you have seen, witnessed earlier on, I love interacting with the customers. They love us. On the hottest days, for instance, where we had to close, we had queues here because people come here to be together. So it will be a massive impact on the community as well on ourselves. When we had COVID, some kind of help, some furlough scheme, some kind of scheme to help us businesses as well. That would be, what we're hoping for. So that's what keeps us going for the moment, because that's what we're having discussions every single day. So how are we going to get out of this mess? Hopefully the new government is going to help us in some way. So we're having this discussion with my business partner on a daily basis.
Yeah. And your cafe is in Liz Truss's constituency. She actually lives in Downham Market. Have you met her? Has she been in?
Yes,
You've met her? And
met her.
how did you find her?
Not now, when she was a Conservative, she was the MP for Downham, Kings Lynn.
Yeah, before she was in government.
Before she was in government. I've met her at my daughter's school. She was doing some school visits. She seemed like a nice person, yeah. But I mean, we don't have a choice right now, so she's the Prime Minister, so for the next couple of years we'll just have to rely on her and see how she gets on.
A woman in a cafe there. Joining us now is GB News' political editor Darren McCaffrey, who's actually at Downing Street, where Liz Truss is going to be giving her maiden speech as Prime Minister. So, Darren, what's the latest there? Is the mood electric? I can believe that there's media packed onto that particular road there. And crucially now, our resident weatherman and political editor, Darren McCaffrey, we need his weather update, because otherwise we couldn't possibly give Liz Truss an umbrella, for goodness sake. Her hair would go all frizzy, everything would kick off. We'd have to go inside. Is the big speech from Downing Street on?
Well, it is, yes, I think, but you know what? It may well rain. It's getting quite dark again here in Downing Street with your latest weather update, Patrick. But yes, a rather jazzy lectern has just appeared outside the front door. It's the one that was used yesterday when Liz Truss was announced as Conservative leader, though they have taken off the Union flag. I think that was attached to it yesterday. Different from the one the Prime Minister used this morning, must be said. But yes, some of the circus here in number 10, as you would expect. We have got maybe upwards of 100 MPs, by the looks of things, at the very end of the street, who will gather around a bit closer when Liz Truss gets a little bit closer to listen to what the new Prime Minister has to say. And there are hundreds of journalists from across the country and indeed across the world literally right in front of me waiting for that speech. Liz Truss is currently blitzing it through London. That motorcade is getting her from RAF Northolt to Downing Street. We were expecting this speech in around 10 minutes' time. I'm not entirely so precisely where she is, but I suspect we will see her in the next 10-15 minutes. And as we were talking about earlier, this is a really, really crucial speech for any Prime Minister, but I think it is particularly crucial for Liz Truss, given where the country, the state, frankly, the country is in. She's going to set out she's going to have to set out a narrative of what she wants to achieve during her premiership, how she's going to tackle some of the big issues facing the country, whether that is the cost of living crisis, particularly when it comes to those rising energy bills, how she can grow the economy, which is something she's put at the heart of her premiership, and I suspect we'll hear that time and time again. Also, how is she going to deliver? Because that is what she talked about an awful lot yesterday, almost kind of playing on Tony Blair's words, talking about how she's going to deliver and reiterating that 3 times. So it's going to be a really, really key speech. We will have live coverage of it. But at the moment, the MPs are all being held at that end of the street. We're all waiting with bated breath here. And the lectern, as you can see, is primed and ready to go.
Yeah, Darren, thank you. I'm just going to stick with you for a little bit, Darren, if that's OK. The MPs gathering, the media gathering, the suspense is almost overwhelming here as we're waiting for Liz Truss to deliver that maiden speech outside Downing Street. But she has, as you rightly said, Darren, made a point of delivering. Now, I think a lot of people in this country were a little bit sick and tired of how long this Conservative leadership race went on, because the real issues affecting real people have not gone away. The energy crisis, whether it's the war in Ukraine, immigration. Now, Liz Truss is going to want to seem like a woman of action, so she's going to have to get her skates on. Do we think that maybe this cabinet will be announced very quickly? Are we expecting it to happen pretty much straight away after she's given her maiden speech, or are we thinking there could still be some hangover? Is it like human chess? You've got to move a few people around. How quickly is Liz Truss going to get her skates on, Darren?
I think pretty quickly. Frankly, Liz Truss is not really going to have a honeymoon period in all of this. She just simply doesn't have the time. Part of that, you're right, is saying that many felt that Conservative leadership race simply went on for too long. But some of these big decisions are going to have to be made pretty quickly. Let's start with the Cabinet. Yes, we're expecting those appointments within hours, frankly, maybe even within the hour when she goes into number 10. Now, why is that? In part because actually, having kind of known that she was going to win for the last couple of weeks, they've already been working on who might be in and out of the Cabinet, though these things are never firmly and absolutely settled until they are. And we know in the past, from past form, of course, that there have been people who've not agreed to do jobs, and that has messed everything up, and they've had to restart on the whiteboard again and try and work out who could fill in where. And we think a little bit of that has happened actually in the last couple of days or so, particularly around the job of the Northern Ireland Secretary and maybe others. Ian Duncan Smith, for example, saying that he didn't want to serve in Cabinet as Leader of the Commons. He wanted a departmental post, which he wasn't willing to give him, and thus he's decided to stay on the backbenches. Nadine Dorris was asked to stay in the Department of Culture, Media and Sports. She has decided not to do that, so who's going to take that position? So yes, we're going to get those Cabinet details, I would suspect, pretty quickly, certainly by close of play tonight, and then tomorrow morning we'll get the first Cabinet meeting inside number 10. She then has to go to Parliament for her first Prime Minister's Question Time, a pretty daunting prospect for any Prime Minister any week, not least of all for Liz Truss in the first week. And then we are expecting, we think on Thursday, this big policy announcement on what may well happen with those energy prices, whether we will see this freeze on the energy price cap that's much talked about, that could cost upwards of 100 billion quid.
OK, fantastic stuff, Darren. Really appreciate you keeping us up to date there. If you're just joining us here on GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys, we're on, initially anyway, Downing Street watch. Liz Truss whizzing our way to Downing Street. We'll be giving you that maiden speech live as and when it comes. It could be anywhere from really 15 minutes to half an hour away, but as and when Liz Truss does take to that plinth, we will indeed be giving it to you. And then, seamlessly, we move on to Cabinet Watch, don't we? As the new announcements are made, is essentially who's going to be helping her run this country. Massive issues at play. We're going to be bringing you all the very latest. Stay with us here at GB News Live. But first, it's time for a news update.
Patrick, thank you. Good afternoon to you. Well, as you've been hearing, Liz Truss, our new Prime Minister, is on her way to Downing Street, where she'll make her first speech as Prime Minister. She's already had an audience with Her Majesty the Queen at Balmoral Castle in Scotland this morning, where she was invited to form a new government. In her first address to the nation, the new Prime Minister is expected to announce an emergency support package to deal with the energy crisis. Later today, she'll also name her new cabinet. Well, earlier on today, Buckingham Palace confirmed that Boris Johnson had tendered his resignation, which Her Majesty was graciously pleased to accept. Mr Johnson and his wife Carrie spent almost 30 minutes with the monarch before leaving Balmoral. And Scotland's First Minister has laid out an agenda to introduce emergency legislation to freeze rents and rail fares. It's all part of the Scottish Government's plans to deal with the cost of living crisis. Nicola Sturgeon also announced a temporary hold on evictions and said an energy strategy would be published in the coming year. Official sources have told GB News Albanian criminal gangs are risking a major tragedy by pushing small boats into the English Channel in poor weather. Despite deteriorating conditions, Ministry of Defence figures show 188 people crossed into UK waters yesterday and today. There were at least 3 small boats which were also intercepted. Now, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are in Germany today for a reception to mark the one-year countdown to the Invictus Games, which will be held in Dusseldorf. Prince Harry founded the Games to help aid the rehabilitation of military personnel and veterans by giving them the challenge of competing in sporting events similar to the Paralympics. You're up to date on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. Now we can go back to Patrick.
OK, people, strap yourselves in because we're still waiting for the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, to give her maiden speech from Downing Street. We're going to be going to that very, very shortly. But Sophie Reaper, our North West reporter, is in Bolton. I've been looking forward to this feature all day, I must say. She's in Bolton at the local Conservative club. Yes, there it is, where she's speaking to Tory party members. Sophie, great to have you on the show. And what is a momentous day? Tell us more about what the members, the real people, are feeling about Liz Truss as we prepare to hear from her live from Downing Street.
Well, it's been a bit of a mixed reaction so far today in Bolton. Some people agree that Liz Truss was the right decision, but some people think that Rishi Sunak would do a better job. In terms of the now former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, some people feel he should have stayed, whereas others have welcomed him to go. I was speaking to people earlier at Bolton Market to ask what Liz Truss, as the now Prime Minister, can do for the people of Bolton.
He says he's taking his clothes off and traumatised the general public, all in the name of shameless self-promotion.
All right, I tell you... Oh, gosh.
You realise that he's trying to take a leaf out of your...
She won't do everything what she said she's going to do. They promise everything and they don't keep to it.
No, what we want really a quick, clear review on the energy, particularly side of the things, because bills are already spiraling and skyrocketing and so on. And if nothing is done very, very quickly and soon, everybody will be down.
I think it's the best of the decision for what we've been given. I don't think either of them are quite suitable because we're going to get a lot of promises and I don't think they're going to deliver on most of them.
Yes, we're just going to have to interrupt you there, I'm afraid. It's OK, Sophie, sorry about this. We're just going to have to step in because we're just getting live images now of Liz Truss, I believe, arriving at Downing Street. As far as I am aware, Liz Truss is about to arrive anyway. At Downing Street, the motorcade that picked her up from RAF Northolt is, as we understand it anyway, relatively close now to the epicentre of power where she will be pulling up shortly and giving her maiden speech from outside that famous front door. We believe there might have been just a slight hold-up. There we go. Classic. It is, of course, live news. What could possibly go wrong? Sophie, I cut you off in your prime there. We're back to you, I believe. Sophie Reaper, who is at a Conservative club for us in Bolton. Apologies, Sophie. You know what the score is, though. I'm afraid sometimes these things happen. Maybe she's stuck at a red light. What's the latest where you are, Sophie?
Of course. Well, I'm joined now by John Walsh, who is one of the councillors here in Bolton. Now, let me just ask you first, John, was Liz Truss the right decision?
In my view, yes. When we got into final two, I felt she was the obvious candidate. I think it was a fresh start that she delivers. I think Rishi Sunak did an excellent job during COVID and lockdown, and the furlough schemes he introduced I thought were good. But I think he was beginning to become tarnished, and therefore a fresh start with Liz Truss, I think, is going to give us an opportunity to rebuild the party quickly and to tackle some of those major issues that clearly are to the fore.
Well, you were telling me earlier that you've done this now. Is it for 47 years? Sorry to give away your age there a little bit. But just tell me, how does Liz Truss compare to former Prime Ministers that you may have seen throughout your time?
I think every Prime Minister comes in bringing fresh hope, but always a degree of scepticism. Margaret Thatcher came in 77. She wasn't the most popular candidate, and she came from nowhere to become Prime Minister, and she proved to be an absolutely outstanding Prime Minister. Other Prime Ministers started well, but with a divided party. William Hague had that problem, was a leader of the party, didn't become Prime Minister. John Major had a very divided party as Prime Minister. So I think it's not new. Labour Prime Ministers had the same sort of problem in the past. But they've got to bring to the table some fresh ideas, and they've got to do, in this case, some pretty important and quick fixes to address the problems that we face as a nation and individuals. No question people are feeling the squeeze, that people are concerned, more than concerned, deeply worried about energy costs and the cost of living. That's got to be addressed, and I anticipate from all the signs that are coming forward, we're going to hear from Liz Truss some fairly dramatic and speedy responses to how we're going to address the energy crisis.
You say that we're going to hear from Liz Truss. We are just waiting now to hear from the new Prime Minister. What do you think she needs to say in this speech to gain the trust of people, not just in the UK, but specifically in the North, where when I've been speaking to people, it seems that trust isn't really there?
Well, we won a lot of seats in the North West and the North of England. We formed a Conservative government on the back of those seats, winning seats like here in Bolton North East, seats like Lee, and so many others in the North West. We've got to make sure that we deliver on the promises that we make. So the important thing is that she tackles, as a matter of urgency, the energy crisis, that she tackles issues that are worrying people like cost of living generally, that we deal with the longer term issues affecting small businesses, business rate relief, energy costs to them. And if we can tackle some business rate issues, if we can tackle some of the costs on small businesses to make sure that jobs are not lost, that we keep employment high, so that in the North West we have the chance to rebuild an economy that is so desperately needed.
Well, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. We're going to hear from the new Prime Minister very soon, and I'm sure she's going to do what it takes to get that trust from the people of the UK, but also in the North.
Look, thank you very, very much, Sophie. Great to have that update there from what is a massively important part of the UK, and indeed a part that's very close to my heart, the North West. I don't know if we're still waiting, by the way, Sophie, stay where you are, please, if that's all right, but we're still waiting for Liz Truss's motorcade to hurtle its way to Downing Street. We understand it might be there relatively soon. But, Sophie, can I just ask you I'm going to ask you a question to that wonderful chap next to you via the medium of you, if that's all right, Sophie. I'd quite like to know, in that North West area there, in Bolton specifically, why did he become a Conservative? Because traditionally that was a Labour area, right?
Yeah, of course, I will ask that question for you now. They're wondering why area of Bolton specifically, given it's so known for being previously a Labour area.
Well, I've been a councillor for the best part of 47 years when I first elected. I've been councillor here since 1983. So I've got a pretty good record in terms of being re-elected. And Conservatives are re-elected. There are pockets of Bolton where we've had Conservative councillors consistently. And I'm proud to be one of those councillors. But we're now winning seats that we've never won before. The May elections, we won seats that we're not expected to win. We narrowly missed out on other seats. And therefore, I believe that the Conservative message is a very powerful message. And as long as Liz Truss addresses the key issues of energy, of cost of living, as well as tackling the international issues, the Ukraine and the other major issues that affect us, she's got the opportunity for 2.5 years before the next general election to rebuild that trust and to show why Conservatives on the ground delivering at council level can then be translated into Conservative delivering at government.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Look, cheers, Sophie. Thank you so much. And thank you very much to the wonderful people of Bolton as well for allowing us into their Conservative club and giving them the update. I'm going to throw back to Downing Street now. Sophie, wonderful job. Thank you. I'm going to throw back to Downing Street now because Liz Truss is going to arrive at some point soon. But Darren McCaffrey, our political editor, is
I think that's
there.
us done.
And Darren is going to join us very, very shortly. Because we're going to be discussing essentially what that particular chap said there. Darren's got his brolly out. We've been on Weather Watch the whole time and now it looks as though it might actually be raining and Liz Truss has to do it inside. But Darren, we heard from a bloke there in what is now the Blue Wall, used to be the Red Wall up north. He's saying, look, if Liz Truss can get hold of the economy, she can get hold of the energy bill crisis, she can get hold of what's going on in the Channel, then they've still got a chance up north. She's got to address the north of England in this speech, presumably, in my opinion, if she wants to keep them on side. Darren, your views ahead of this speech?
Yeah, indeed, I think you're right, particularly when it comes to this issue of levelling up. And actually, one of the expected cabinet ministers, by the way, it is starting to rain quite heavily here in Downing Street right now, just as we're expecting Liz Truss, I think, to arrive in any moment. A lot of MPs getting wet at one end of the street, a lot of members of staff getting wet at the other end of the street. The timing couldn't be worse. I don't know what this means, whether she might go into Downing Street for a couple of minutes and then emerge. Not entirely sure, but this is not ideal weather for Liz Truss to be making her maiden speech outside Downing Street. It has been coming and going all afternoon, so maybe they might just hold her in the car for a couple of minutes while it clears. We shall wait and see, but she's still hurtling through London, trying to get to number 10. coming back to what I was talking about the blue wall or the former red wall or whatever you want to call it, yes, I think there is a clear recognition within the incoming Truss government that levelling up cannot be abandoned, because they do recognise that political coalition that Boris Johnson had built up in the 2019 election still needs to be maintained if the Conservatives really do want to hold on to power at the next general election. The big question, of course, is for Liz Truss is how does she do that? How does she do that in terms of trying to redistribute wealth again beyond London at a time in which we could all be feeling quite poor because of the economic crisis? But also, where does the money come from? Public finances are going to be pretty restrained over the next coming years. Will there be money for big capital spend projects like there has been in the past? And of course, with inflation, Patrick, as high as it is, that already eats into the money that's been set aside for levelling up. So, you know, if you've got £100 billion set aside for it, with inflation rising all the time, that money goes less far. It's all going to be difficult decisions, but politically you're right in saying that the new government are very aware that they cannot abandon this. It is really, I mean, I do feel like a weatherman, it really is pelting it down in Downing Street. Now, I know sometimes you can pick this up on the TV very easily, but I cannot imagine that Liz Truss is going to make a speech in this. You can see all the brollies now on the screen. I would have thought she'll either hold back in her car or indeed in Downing Street until it is sorted, or she may well go in and then come back out again. But you can see from that man's jacket just how wet it is on the left-hand side of the screen. It is not very pleasant weather. So I think for the time being, even the lectern has been covered with a plastic bag. For the time being, we will wait to see Liz Truss arrival, but it's not going to happen, or this speech, I don't think, until this rain does clear.
I think this is fantastic, right? Because actually what we are witnessing now, essentially, I mean, even for our radio listeners, they can tell that it's bucketing down at Downing Street because of the noise of the rain bouncing off Darren McCaffrey's umbrella as he basically delivers the tragic news for us that Liz Truss, in what is going to be one of the most British sequences of events, have her maiden speech held up by the rain like it's a test match. We're going to have to, or like a barbecue in the middle of the British summer, or indeed like primary school children during their lunch break. She's going to have to go inside and stay there because it's raining, it would seem. But Darren McCaffrey will be joining us throughout, and we'll be bringing updates, and Liz Truss might have to just sit in the car a little bit. Go on, Darren, are you travelling in? What's that?
No, I was just saying rain has stopped play for the time being.
Rain has stopped play.
It doesn't get more British than that.
No, it doesn't, exactly. We're waiting for the one person there, normally like you would see at a barbecue, still in the Hawaiian shorts and shirt, ploughing on regardless of the weather. But Darren, thank you so much. We'll return now to Downing Street very, very shortly, as and when Liz Truss gives her speech. Although I suppose, ladies and gentlemen, it could be a good use of this new press room that we heard so much about during the coronavirus crisis, didn't we? All the millions of pounds or whatever it was that was spent on that new room. It might now actually be a chance to use it. If you are just joining us, it is suitably chaotic here. It's a big news day. It's Britain. It's breaking. It's rolling. So, yes, we do have a little bit of chaos coming your way, but I think we all love to see it, don't we? Liz Truss is edging her way ever closer now to Downing Street, where she's going to be giving us her maiden speech. We're expecting as well, shortly after that, of course, the Cabinet to be announced, some big names moving around in that. Therese Coffey is in Downing Street. We don't think she's left yet. She's tipped to become the new Health Secretary. She's also tipped to potentially become the new Deputy Prime Minister. Kwasi Kwarteng widely expected to become the new Chancellor. Suella Braverman tipped to become the new Home Secretary. We spoke earlier on, actually, to a Border Force officer, a former Border Force officer, who said to us pretty simply that in his mind immigration is the major issue facing Liz Truss going forward. So in his view, although that's what you would expect from a Border Force officer, that is more important than the cost of living crisis. And he was saying that why not actually put somebody in charge who understands Border Force. I know it might seem like a radical notion, but bear in mind the chap that we had in charge before essentially was a glorified civil servant. Maybe that would do a lot to appease would appease a lot of what's going on in the Channel. I understand now that the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey, has also spoken about Liz Truss becoming the new Prime Minister, so we can get what Ed Davey has been saying now, for what that's worth. He said the whole Conservative Party needs to go. So there we go. Thank you, Ed. I think, can we hear a bit from Ed Davey as well? Apparently not. There we are. I believe, OK, in fact, there's some action taking place out at Downing Street. We thought we were on Liz Truss watch, now we're on plinth watch. The plinth has been taken away because of bad weather. So where Liz Truss was supposed to be doing her speech from outside Downing Street has now been turned into an empty street. So Liz Truss is not going to be doing her speech as it currently stands from outside Downing Street. I'm going back to Darren McCaffrey now, who is presumably going to tell us that a plinth has been moved. Darren.
Yeah, it is chucking it down here. You know what? They have shifted things around all day today, trying to make it work. I'm just going to move the mic out so you get a sense of just how hard the rain is here. As I say, they have moved things around to try and ensure this would not happen. And in the 10-minute window in which they'd set aside for Liz Truss to make her speech, the heavens have opened. A lot of her advisors are still determined to stand in the street. They're getting wet. Therese Coffey is running in under an umbrella, I can see in the background. It is coming down so hard. They have moved the lectern in because it is raining so heavily. We are not going to hear from Liz Truss anytime soon. Look at that image. There's Therese Coffey on the left-hand side in the white jacket, seeking cover, having stayed out for the last 10 minutes under an umbrella. That's how desperate the weather is here. We've got 100 MPs getting soaked in the corner at the other end of Downing Street, and hundreds of journalists feeling likewise. I'm not entirely sure that was some thunder. Pretty horrific weather. As I say, we're not going to hear from Liz Truss. She had been belting it back from RAF Norfolk a little earlier on, as she was trying to get back in time to make this speech at 4:40, having, of course, met the Queen in Balmoral earlier on today. She's not had the best of the days with the weather. Her plane earlier on at Aberdeen Airport had a circle several times before it could land because of inclement weather earlier. And now she's facing this. I'm sure her team and indeed her supporters don't feel that this may be a sign of things to come, given how bad it is. What do we do? You're in a nice studio, Patrick. I just have to stand under an umbrella and wait in this rain until it does happen, along, as you can see, with hundreds of other people.
Well, with hundreds of other people, one of whom is actually supposedly the incoming health secretary, who I'm amazed has not, as some kind of matter of public health, told all of you to get inside because you'll catch a chill if you stay out there in that driving rain outside Downing Street, literally bouncing off the street. So yes, it does look as though Liz Truss's speech is going to be delayed somewhat, but no matter, ladies and gentlemen, we've got it all under control here, even if it doesn't look like it, because Mark White is joining me right now, GBNews' Home and Security Editor. Mark White. Mark, thank you very, very much. We're going to continue to show, if you're watching us on TV or online, the pictures from Downing Street, as actually we can see the press now being siphoned away, so yes, definitely a delay. They're going to give Liz Truss's speech live, which will delay things somewhat, but Mark, of course, we've been talking about some of the most important issues in Liz Truss's intro, and indeed cabinet appointments. One of those big issues, Home Secretary, immigration, and just today as well it's emerged that Albanian gangs are essentially putting more people's lives at risk by shoving people out into the Channel in inclement weather as well.
Yes, absolutely. Now, this will be a priority, of course, for Liz Truss when she gets into Downing Street, once she makes that speech, now indoors, of course. Yeah. Let's hope it's not a...
Fingers crossed.
Let's hope it's not an omen for her premiership. But, yeah, just appalling weather conditions there. Got a feel for our colleagues down in Downing Street. Their poor wee feet will be getting wet. But we expect that the big offices of state are likely to be announced this evening. So what are we talking about? The Foreign Secretary, of course, the Chancellor and the Home Secretary. We might even get an announcement on defence, because that's so important at the moment, given what's happening in Ukraine. And, of course, Suella Braverman is the one that everybody is tipping to take over at the Home Office. There's been so much speculation in recent weeks about the fact that Priti Patel would not be staying in office under a Liz Truss premiership. She clearly decided, as soon as she heard that Liz Truss was to become Prime Minister, that she would go rather than being pushed. But it is a big entry that, of course, Liz Truss has. But if Suella Braverman is the one that takes over at the Home Office, a big entry that she will have as well, not least, of course, the migrant crisis, the Channel small boat crisis, where you were mentioning in your introduction to me about Albanians pushing people out in just this kind of weather. With 30-mile-an-hour winds in the Channel, which is churning everything up. They are pushing these boats into the English Channel, and some real concern. And we could see a tragedy like we did last November when 27 people were killed.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, stay right there. I've just had it through in my ear now that we are expecting Liz Truss at 5:05, which is just under 10 minutes' time. So clearly something has moved relatively quickly. I suspect that is all of the people running inside from the rain, and it would appear anyway that presumably if she's doing it in about 9 minutes' time, that will be from within Downing Street somewhere. So we'll bring you the latest on that. As you can imagine, it is quite literally a fast-moving feast here at the moment as this nation tries to come to terms with the fact that it's raining a little bit. But, Mark, in terms of some of the other cabinet appointments that are within your brief, we've got Justice as well, haven't we?
Yeah, so Dominic Raab at the moment, of course, not just Deputy Prime Minister, but the Justice Secretary. The hot money, it seems, is on Brandon Lewis to take over that job. That's important as well because law and order, always very important as far as Conservative voters are concerned. Actually, the country as a whole, they're all invested in ensuring that justice is seen to be done for those who are offending. And we can say those are live shots at the moment.
This is brilliant. If anyone, I mean, I would urge everybody, if you are listening on your radio, to pull over now and watch on the television as Downing Street looks like a scene from a Benny Hill movie, as everybody is being shuffled along. In case you thought that it was chaos here as we await what on earth is going to happen and where it's going to happen regarding Liz Truss, our new Prime Minister, giving her maiden speech as Prime Minister from Downing Street, all of the press and media were shuffled what looked like inside, and apparently it might now have stopped raining and now they're back outside. But, Mark, you were discussing as well potential cabinet appointments.
Yes, well, just on the point of Liz Truss and making progress, you know, before I was lauding the abilities of the special escort to whisk her to Downing Street very quickly. They are very good, but there's no accounting for London traffic. And when I was looking at the progress that they were making, they were just about 10 minutes ago or so at Shepherd's Bush Green, which is never easy to get around, I know, because that's my manor. And then heading down towards Marble Arch and heading clearly for Downing Street. So they're not too far away now, but it's never easy when you're into rush hour, as we are fast approaching now, even in the summer months.
Even in the summer months, and even with the police officers' whistles, which they use as well, don't they? They don't use sirens. So you corrected me. I stood corrected live on air, Mark White.
I only gently correct you, Patrick.
Yes.
Educate rather than correct.
Yes, absolutely. But enough about Mark White's gentle correction. So we are going to be bringing you the very latest from Downing Street. I can report live now that the lectern is back out, right? So the lectern is back out, which does seem to indicate that Liz Truss is going to be speaking to us live from outside Downing Street as opposed to within it. We're going to be then bringing you the latest when it comes to the cabinet appointments as well. Liz Truss's speech here is a massive one. It's going to set the tone. Now, she does have to follow on from Boris Johnson, who actually gave a very, very rousing goodbye farewell speech from just exactly there earlier this morning, very early this morning, before he had to go to Aberdeen to go meet the Queen at Balmoral because, of course, ironically, bad weather was threatening to get in the way of his helicopter flight there. But we are going to be giving you Liz Truss's speech. Now, it's interesting, really, Mark, isn't it, to see what she does and how she delivers this, because she'll want to set out an agenda, but at the same time, she's dealing with unprecedented times, almost on a war footing, quite literally when it comes to Ukraine. Then we've got cost of living. Then we've got immigration as well. We've got a law and order crisis. She's also following Boris Johnson, who actually left in quite almost jovial terms, very defiant terms. Liz Truss, of course, herself, not a natural orator.
Well, no, but, there are people that think that she's certainly a very serious operator. Her mantra is, of course, that she always gets things done. I think there is no doubt when she makes that speech at Downing Street, amidst, of course, the excitement of taking office, she will be very clear to people about the job ahead, given what we have with the cost of living crisis driven up by the energy prices, what is happening in Ukraine at the moment. It's a very big job, a lot in her entry when she takes over. And I think we will get I'm sure, an optimistic tone, but also quite a serious tone in terms of what the government faces in the weeks and months ahead in trying to ensure that they can get, as best they can, a way out of this economic crisis.
Yeah, indeed. And again, I'm just getting it fed through to me right now. We're expecting Liz Truss to arrive at Downing Street in 5 minutes now. So 5 minutes' time, Liz Truss will be giving you a speech. And we're going to be going live to that, of course. And we can see, actually, MPs, various different MPs and political figures lined up awaiting for her. We've got Jacob Rees-Mogg, who was earlier there with his 15-year-old son, Peter, to wave goodbye to Boris Johnson. So 2 prime ministers in one day for Mr Mogg there. Then, of course, we'll be giving you the latest when it comes to the cabinet appointments. It does appear as though Liz Truss's motorcade will be arriving very, very shortly now. And 3 minutes' time, so we're very much on Liz watch. Liz Truss has already come out. It's been interesting to see if she says more on this. She's already insinuated strongly that she's going to be freezing energy bills. Is that good news for you? What do you want to see from that? Do you, or would you, I should say, take the hit now when it comes to your energy bills and maybe save future generations from the cost of that? Or are you going to be seeing actually the fact that you would rather essentially have people kicking it down the line? Mark, when we are, well, we're about to go anyway to Liz Truss. He's now just a couple of minutes away from taking to the platform outside Downing Street.
Yeah, these moments, Patrick, are always the most anxious as far as the security detail are concerned, because you will often get protesters who are gathered outside the entrance to Downing Street, and it's as they sweep in to Downing Street, the vehicles slow down, there is most concern.
Yeah, the arrival is now imminent of Liz Truss. We're going to go back to Downing Street, where we've got both Darren McCaffrey, who's our political editor, and Liam Halligan, who's our business and economics editor. Both of them are together in the same shot, which is handy. Darren, I'll start with you. What's the latest from the scene? People were moving in, now they're moving out. What's going on?
Those were MPs that you were talking about a little earlier on that were at one stage getting absolutely soaked and were moving towards the Cabinet Office and are back out on the street again. Glad to say the rain has finally stopped. We are expecting Liz Truss to stand at that podium just behind me in a couple of minutes' time to deliver that maiden speech. A very significant moment from her. And then almost immediately afterwards, we're going to start to see cabinet ministers, newly appointed cabinet ministers, come up this street and go into that famous black door building behind me to Downing Street and get their jobs, and we'll find out who is going to be in position. Clearly a key job is going to be that of Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng, the man who is across all of this, and indeed what Liz Truss may well say in the days ahead to try and tackle the biggest issue the country faces. Liam Halligan, our economics editor, to talk about the economics and the energy price freeze. First of all, let's talk about Kwasi Kwarteng. Is there a sense that him and Liz Truss are essentially on the same page when it comes to what needs to be done in the weeks and months to come?
They're very closely aligned politically and indeed by dint of their political background. They came into the Commons at the same time in 2010. They wrote books together during their early times in the Commons. Indeed, Darren, some people have said that Kwasi Kwarteng and Liz Truss have had a kind of pact. If he backed her campaign to become Prime Minister, she would make him Chancellor. But the model they seem to want to work on is definitely a kind of David Cameron, George Osborne model, rather than a Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, or dare I say a Rishi Sunak, Boris Johnson, more tense model between number 10 and number 11. A huge economic in-tray. There's clearly going to be a big energy support package in the next couple of days, probably on Thursday. The idea is to freeze the energy price cap where it was back in October. Back in April, so that's about £2,000 a year for the average bill. But that will cost a huge amount of money, Darren, to keep that energy price cap in place in the face of high wholesale prices, possibly as much as £100 billion.
Liam, I'm just going to interrupt you there because we're going to have to duck down at this point, but we can carry on the discussion because we are expecting Liz Truss literally in the next minute or two, so we're going to have to sit down because we're not allowed to be stood up during this, Liam. But this is a big moment, isn't it, for the new Prime Minister, someone who, as you say, actually has served in the Cabinet for quite a long period of time.
Who is often underestimated in life. I know her close aides are looking to use that sense of being underestimated as an advantage in her early days. I think if she can really get her arms around this cost of living crisis, particularly these spiralling energy price rises, then people may begin to warm to her. It's certainly the case that she does come in with low expectations, but I've talked to her about that in recent days, and she says she's been used to that kind of treatment in life, and she's relishing all the challenges that she faces in number 10.
Well, I'm just looking at the Downing Street gates here, and we are still expecting her to arrive, as I say, in the next minute or two, though the traffic is still going. Oh, there we go. I think we can start to see the motorcades and those police outriders move into place. The gates of Downing Street are now open. We are expecting Liz Truss, Britain's newly appointed 56th Prime Minister, to arrive here in Downing Street for the first time as Prime Minister. She, of course, is Britain's third female Prime Minister as well, elected as leader of the Conservative Party yesterday. She is then going to come into Downing Street in the next couple of minutes, go to that lectern in front of the famous Black Door and make a speech that is going to set out, in many ways, the narrative for her premiership. And that's why, Liam, isn't it, that this speech is so important, because it sets the parameters, the narrative, if you like, for her entire premiership.
I think the next couple of weeks are crucial, Darren. Parliament will only be sitting for less than a month. The party conference season will start up soon, and Parliament will rise again for another month, at a time when a lot of the country is looking for leadership. So the tone that she sets now, particularly with this speech, the tone that she sets in the next couple of days as she unveils that huge household energy support package plus support for businesses, is really going to be vital to the future of her premiership.
And here she comes. Here is Britain's new Prime Minister with her husband, being greeted by rounds of applause from Conservative MPs as she approaches the number 10 lectern. Let's listen to Liz Truss's first speech as Prime Minister.
The Queen's kind invitation to form a new government. Let me pay tribute to my predecessor. Boris Johnson delivered Brexit, the COVID vaccine, and stood up to Russian aggression. History will see him as a hugely consequential Prime Minister. I'm honoured to take on this responsibility at a vital time for our country. What makes the United Kingdom great is our fundamental belief in freedom, in enterprise, and in fair play. Our people have shown grit, courage, and determination time and time again. We now face severe global headwinds caused by Russia's appalling war in Ukraine and the aftermath of COVID. Now is the time to tackle the issues that are holding Britain back. We need to build roads, homes, and broadband faster. We need more investment and great jobs in every town and city across our country. We need to reduce the burden on families and help people get on in life. I know that we have what it takes to tackle those challenges. Of course, it won't be easy, but we can do it. We will transform Britain into an aspiration nation, with high-paying jobs, safe streets, and where everyone, everywhere, has the opportunities they deserve. I will take action this day and action every day to make it happen. United with our allies, we will stand up for freedom and democracy around the world, recognising that we can't have security at home without having security abroad. As Prime Minister, I will pursue three early priorities. Firstly, I will get Britain working again. I have a bold plan to grow the economy through tax cuts and reform. I will cut taxes to reward hard work and boost business-led growth and investment. I will drive reform in my mission to get the United Kingdom working, building and growing. We'll get spades in the ground to make sure people are not facing unaffordable energy bills And we will also make sure that we are building hospitals, schools, roads and broadband. Secondly, I will deal hands-on with the energy crisis caused by Putin's war. I will take action this week to deal with energy bills and to secure our future energy supply. Thirdly, I will make sure that people can get doctor's appointments and the NHS services they need. We will put our health service on a firm footing. By delivering on the economy, on energy and on the NHS, we will put our nation on the path to long-term success. We shouldn't be daunted by the challenges we face. As strong as the storm may be, I know that the British people are stronger. Our country was built by people who get things done. We have huge reserves of talent, of energy and determination. I am confident that together we can ride out the storm, we can rebuild our economy, and we can become the modern, brilliant Britain that I know we can be. This is our vital mission to ensure opportunity and prosperity for all people and future generations. I am determined to deliver. Thank you.
Right, OK, well, that was Liz Truss there in her maiden speech as she stands there next to her husband outside Downing Street. So just to kind of recap a little bit about what she said, it wasn't what you'd call particularly detail-heavy, although I suppose it's her prerogative to at least get her cabinet in position first, isn't it, before she starts dishing out the exact, precise detail on what she's going to do. She said she wants to get a Britain that's working, building and growing. So what can we read into that then? Well, obviously employment rate. She wants to try to get the employment rate as high as possible. That's natural. Building has been an issue that has been very, very close to a lot of people's hearts. We're not building enough homes, certainly when it comes to what's going on in the Channel, and genuine population growth as well. Building things like public services to take the strain off. So things like new hospitals, new schools, and growing. That is in no small part a nod to the economy. One key aspect of Liz Truss's speech when she became Conservative Party leader, and what she says she's going to do economically to continue as Prime Minister is go for growth. We're going to hear that a lot from Liz Truss. That's why she's been defending essentially tax breaks potentially for the wealthy to try to get Britain booming from the top down, as opposed to, I suppose, in a way, you could say, although levelling up is not the best turn of phrase to use when it comes to the Conservatives at the moment, from the bottom up. Energy bills, she promised there to get those energy bills down, or at least cap them. She said this, we've been hearing this all day, that energy bills may well be capped at £2,500 for people. That could well cost the British public around £130 billion in the long run. She did say as well, following on from her initial mantra of deliver, 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 that she is going to be head of a party who will get things done. Now, I suspect strongly that's a nod to who she's going to be putting in her cabinet, because she said she wants to fill the party with people who get things done. This is interesting, of course, because there's a lot in her in tray, isn't there, when it comes to immigration, when it comes to the cost of living, when it comes to what's going on in Ukraine, when it comes to justice, when it comes to all of those top jobs. She needs people who can get things done. I believe we might be able to cross back over to Downing Street now. GBNews' political editor, Darren McCaffrey, joining me from there, and Liam Halligan as well, our business editor and economic editor indeed. Darren, I'll start with you. You saw that live. You were up close and personal with our new Prime Minister. What's your main takeaway for us?
Yeah, Liam's just grabbing his umbrella. He thinks it's going to rain again. Let me talk you through, I think, what she said. The key line for me, actually, was together we can ride out this storm. And we were talking about this a little bit earlier, weren't we, about whether she would recognise that things are pretty difficult at the moment. She had a bit of a pop, it must be said, at the Bank of England a couple of weeks ago about being too doom-laden with her prediction of a recession. Today, a recognition that, you know, frankly, things aren't great at the moment with that line, but also a sign of optimism that we can ride out this storm together, focusing on 3 key areas: getting Britain working again with tax cuts boosting growth, driving reform, getting her hands on that energy crisis, details that we're going to get later on this week, she said. So that expectation that we're going to get details on an energy kind of crisis management, if you like, with that price freeze is likely to come on Thursday, and also get the NHS on a firm footing. Real concerns, of course, about heading into the winter with the situation for the National Health Service when it comes post-pandemic. She said she was honoured to take on the role at a vital time for our country. Liam Halligan, as you can see, is with me here as well. Liam, what did you take away from that speech? Very, very economy focused, unsurprisingly.
Absolutely, it was short on philosophy, long on economics. She mentioned very practical things. Twice she mentioned that we need to roll out more broadband across the UK. She mentioned how difficult it is to get a GP appointment. She mentioned house building, and as you say, Darren, she mentioned getting to grips with this energy crisis, quotes, caused by Vladimir Putin's war. That's partly true, though, of course. Energy prices were very high before Russia invaded Ukraine. I think what we are going to see on Thursday is a very concentrated package of support, a huge package of support that will allow Liz Truss to face down anybody who say she's a small state ideologue. I think we're going to look at the realms of something between 70 and 100 billion pounds of support to keep energy prices reasonable, capped where they were back in April 2022, so higher than this time last year, but not as high as that off-gem energy price cap that was going to come in October. And the package, Darren, I think in the last couple of days something has really clicked in the minds of ministers and officials. They understand it's not just about helping the 27 million households who are covered by that off-gem energy price cap. It's about helping the hundreds of thousands of businesses employing millions of people and generating the tax revenue on which everything else depends across the UK who aren't protected by that off-gem energy price cap.
Isn't it extraordinary, though, that Liz Truss literally yesterday stood up and said, I was elected as a Conservative leader and I'm going to lead a Conservative government, and yet probably her first significant act as Prime Minister will be some of the greatest intervention from the governments, particularly we've seen in the energy market since the 1970s.
And that will be portrayed as pragmatism and addressing events as they are rather than being ideological. Look, she started life as a Liberal Democrat. She just had an audience with the Queen, having given a speech when she was a student politician that was against the monarchy. She voted Remain in 2016, and yet she's become very much, you know, even for the ERG on the right of the Conservative Party, she's become the flame bearer of a thoroughly executed Brexit. So she is a bit of a political shapeshifter, as your question indicates, and I do think she's going to have to be very flexible in the weeks and months ahead. I think she's going to be buffeted by public sector unions as they vote for strike action, private sector unions too. I don't think she's going to get necessarily a warm reception from many of our colleagues in the broadcast and print media. It's going to be very, very tough for her. This is one of the toughest in-trays that any peacetime Prime Minister has ever faced, but she's nothing if not thick-skinned. She's a tough, resolute politician, so let's see how she shapes up in the next few weeks.
And just very finally, Liam, we should reflect on this a little bit, shouldn't we, as well? You know, this is an historic moment. Britain's 56th Prime Minister, third female Prime Minister. She's had been currently the longest-serving Cabinet Minister up until this point. And yet she's also a mid-term Prime Minister. And that's always incredibly difficult because you've not got your own mandate from the public, and she's got to deal with a pretty fractious party.
It is a historic moment, you know, unless pundits like us are completely wrong. Offices of state are going to be held by two women, people from ethnic minorities, people whose parents came here from West Africa in the 1960s.
Yeah, I think it's the first time that all four officers of state, not one of them will be held by a white man.
Which is, you know, I don't see that happening in any other advanced country, certainly no other European country. So I think we should all take a moment to, whatever our political creed or colour, whatever ethnicity we're from, that is a good reflection for my money of modern Britain. At the same time, though, she is going to have to really roll with the punches. I do think the next few weeks are going to be very, very fraught for her, as even this energy package she's going to roll out on Thursday, a lot of people are going to say you're too generous to the rich. Other people are going to say you should be taxing the big oil companies more with that windfall tax. You're not going to please everyone, but I think the scale of the package we're going to see on Thursday will surprise a lot of people.
OK, Liam Halligan, for the time being, as always, thank you very much indeed. As Liam says, we're expecting that announcement on Thursday, but the first act, actually, as Prime Minister, Patrick, will be appointing the Cabinet. We're expecting that to happen literally within the next hour or so. Those announcements will come, and we will see those Cabinet Ministers walk up and down Downing Street as they're handed out those jobs. But unlike in other previous Cabinet appointments, I don't think we're going to see those that get sacked turning up to Downing Street. I don't think we're going to see Dominic Raab, for example, walk up to Downing Street, but we will see the appointees, and it is going to be a fascinating, if not a long evening for us here in Downing Street as that new Cabinet is announced.
Yes, 100%. Both of you, thank you very, very much. Darren McCaffrey and Liam Halligan doing stellar work from Downing Street. I'm just going to dip into my inbox, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Thank you very much to everyone who's been getting in touch, because your emails into me, a lot of them, are teeing up my next guest, who is GB News' very own Nigel Farage. And, frankly, the questions to Nigel write themselves, because they're coming in thick and fast from you. One here. Why didn't you mention the elephant in the room? There was no mention of immigration there, really, from Liz Truss. Nigel's just joining me. I'm going to go to you in a second, Nigel. Just stay there, because I want to hit you with a couple of the views that are coming in. What a start for Liz Truss. And this is from Kelvin. He's saying that actually she didn't mention immigration whatsoever. Yeah, again, another one here. An excellent speech, apart from the mention of immigration. Nigel, the biggest issue... is it at risk of being ducked yet again by a leader, or is it too early to tell?
Well, I don't know. I have to say that unless she sorts out the complete crisis that is happening in the English Channel, then they are doomed at the next election, especially in those red wall seats. As you say, no mention of it whatsoever. We're told Suella Braverman will become the Home Secretary. Let's see what happens over the course of the evening. Now, she was the only one of the candidates to be leader who would contemplate leaving ECHR. So the jury's out, but it's disappointing at this stage she didn't mention it. And the other thing she talked about, building more houses, better roads, broadband rollout, an improved NHS. Whoa, hang on a second. They've been in power for 12 years already. If she's going to change any of those things, she's going to have to be very, very radical. And I felt, Patrick, on balance, I mean, I want her to do well in the interest of the country. I didn't think that was a particularly inspiring first few minutes.
No, I've got to agree with you, actually, Nigel. I was, clearly as you were, watching it live here. And Liz Truss, you have to factor in as well the fact that Liz Truss is not necessarily a natural orator. Now, a lot of people, as indeed I think every single person in this country, for the good of the country, would like to see our Prime Minister do well. But it was very policy-light. Now, for somebody, Nigel, who has deliberately tried to emulate Margaret Thatcher on numerous occasions, Margaret Thatcher had a clear vision for where she wanted Britain to head and dragged us kicking and screaming in that direction. Liz Truss, perhaps not so much.
Well, OK, but then to be fair, I've looked at Margaret Thatcher's speech outside Number 10 back in May 1979, and she didn't say an awful lot in that speech either. So look, we've got a few more days to come. I just felt the tone wasn't particularly uplifting, and I get your point about the fact that she's not the best orator in the world. It didn't look and feel like the speech of somebody about to put in place radical reform. And that's what we need. The UK economy is on the edge of a precipice. I firmly believe that. It needs to be turned around by real confidence, real belief and radical action, not fiddling round the edges.
No, absolutely. And just lastly, Nigel, from you, if that's right, because I know you've got your show coming up as well. I'll get you to run through what's going to be on that. I can imagine it might be dominated largely by what you've heard here. But a bit more of a personal question for you, actually, because you've been in situations where you've been out on the campaign or you've had elections to fight, etc. And then at the end of that, you've had to travel long distances up and down the country and give a big rousing speech. Do you think Liz Truss might actually just be very, very tired? Could she be subdued? What's it actually like to do something a little bit like this? Of course, you yourself, not quite yet anyway, been outside the steps of Downing Street giving a speech.
Well, if she's tired out after a private jet flight to Scotland and back, then goodness me, she's going to need to summon up some more reserves, I think, over the course of the coming months and perhaps even years. Yeah, of course it's tiring. Of course you've got to put long hours in. Of course you're always on show. No one pretended that this was going to be easy. I just felt today she was playing very, very safe. She hasn't got long. I promise you, the markets are looking for a signal, and a very, very quick signal. If they don't get it, we will start to see the pound go into free fall, with that inflation rising and real confidence about the UK's government's ability to borrow money. She needs to move very, very fast.
Nigel, thank you very, very much. A man who moved very, very fast to give us that response to our new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, giving us a statement outside Downing Street. Nigel Farage there, of course. Make sure you stay locked and loaded right here on GB News for Nigel later this evening, 7 till 8 p.m. But let's go now to Conservative MP for Stoke-on-Trent North. It's Jonathan Gullis to get his reaction to Liz Truss's speech. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure that not all of it has sunk in yet, but a lot of people in my inbox saying they wanted a little bit more of a rousing speech. They wanted something, certainly more of a mention when it came to immigration. Your initial reaction to Liz Truss's maiden speech as Prime Minister?
I thought it was the appropriate speech at the end of the day. It's about making a point, very briefly, that ultimately the energy crisis is something that this country hasn't faced since, really, at this scale, since the Second World War, and that she's going to make that an absolute priority, as well as dealing with the NHS backlog. And I feel very confident that Liz will crack on and deliver. It's all well and good giving speeches on the steps of Downing Street. What matters is what she does inside the building, and she's going to carry on straight away with making sure that we deliver for the British people.
Full in tray. It's an absolute nightmare time to become the Prime Minister. Do you think that the Conservative Party now will be united behind Liz Truss? She might not have a honeymoon period when it comes to the British public. That's frankly because we're all seeing our bills piling through the door and goodness knows what else. Will she have a honeymoon period from within the Conservative Party itself?
The Conservative Party will always unite and rally behind the leader because that's the appropriate and correct thing to do. She won the mandate of the membership, therefore she should have and will have our support fully, and it's now about time that we rally behind her because, as you've heard, this week we're going to have a huge announcement on the support that's going to help individuals and businesses on energy, which is vitally needed, and then we can focus on those issues like you mentioned, Patrick, which ones I'm worried about, which is the illegal economic migrants coming over from safe mainland Europe in their droves, which is simply unacceptable.
Yeah, look, absolutely. Just going to pick you up on something you said about the Conservative Party uniting behind a leader there. I mean, you ousted the last one.
Well, let's not forget that no one really wanted to make that decision and that Boris actually chose to go at the end of the day. And I understand that there will be people who think that was a bad choice. And what we hope to do in the coming years ahead is to make sure that people feel that they have had a government that's on their side. People lent me their vote in Stoke-on-Trent North, Kidsgrove and Talk. And I believe under Liz Truss, they'll be able to lend it again. Because let's not forget that woke, wet, wobbly lot, the Labour Party, shouldn't be let anywhere near power because they believe in open borders. They want to rejoin the European Union. They haven't got any plans. They just say what people want to hear. And I think we can all agree that they'd be a danger to this country.
Well, just talk to me a little bit about Stoke-on-Trent North. It's nearish, my neck of the woods anyway, Stoke-on-Trent North. And you said that they lent you their vote there. What does Liz Truss need to say and do to make sure that you get re-elected?
Well, the first thing is to make sure that people feel supported on their bills. They saw that help that they got with furlough and other schemes during the COVID pandemic, which obviously they're very grateful to both Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak for. But they know that this is unprecedented. They're aware this wholesale gas price is being driven by Putin's illegal and immoral war in Ukraine. And so what they want to make sure is they get that help. Then they want to see us deliver on the ground of levelling up. Are we bringing in those new high-skilled, high-wage jobs locally? Are we seeing regeneration of our town centres? And then they want to make sure that we take back control of our borders. 73% voted to leave the European Union. They want to see that firm border control, as do I, and that's why we need to get those people on that plane into Rwanda as soon as possible, and I hope we can get other deals with other countries soon, as Liz has pledged that she wants to do.
Jonathan, isn't it? Because Liz Truss making a massive point out of the fact that she wanted to stand on a ticket of being a Conservative and then actually governing like a Conservative, but she's just rolled off some things I've got in front of me here. Building, for example, helping people with their energy bills, etc., reinvesting in public services, getting our NHS back to its best, etc. All I'm hearing now is this country's cash register going ping, 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 ping. Is it really a little bit deceitful from a Conservative Prime Minister to not maybe fully explain to the British public that we are, the taxpayer, going to be paying for all of this? Where is the money coming from?
Liz is making it perfectly clear that economic growth is the way forward, and by growing our economy, that will help to fund our fantastic public services, but also made it clear that we're going to treat what happened with COVID, and I'm sure this, as a war debt, to make sure that we spread that payment over time, because people understand that this is unprecedented. This is the largest scale fear that we probably faced on our shores since World War II. So I firmly believe that Liz understands the scale of what needs to be done. That's why she has my absolute full support, and that we are being straight with the public, that this is going to be challenging, that of course it's going to initially put some burden on the taxpayer, but ultimately it's going to make sure that further down the line, by cutting taxes, by growing our economy, by getting rid of EU regulation that's unnecessary, we can have a fantastic economy to welcome and better times ahead.
Look, Jonathan, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. That is, of course, the Conservative MP for Stoke-on-Trent North, Jonathan Gullis there, giving his initial reaction to Liz Truss's maiden speech as Prime Minister on the steps of Downing Street. It was indeed on the steps of Downing Street, after much umming and ahhing about whether or not a little bit of rain would put pay to that. Your responses are flooding in. GBViews at gbnews.uk. It's a mixed bag. It's a real mixed bag so far. Some of you saying, for goodness sake, Marianne's been on. For goodness sake, give the woman a break. Marianne says she's just been made Prime Minister. You're expecting her to roll out a whole list of policies? Not necessarily a whole list of policies, but at the same time, it was a little bit policy light, Marianne, to be fair. However, we'll have to wait and see. As our very own Nigel Farage said, she's potentially got a few days to get to grips with the finer points. We here at GB News will be bringing you the latest as the Cabinet announcements are made. Expect them to be made very, very shortly. A flip side to Marianne's comment, which was full of praise for our new leader, Liz Truss, is Sam Gibbs. Far from the Iron Lady, she's the wooden lady. Like I said, very much 50-50. How do you feel, having seen Liz Truss in that first little snippet of action? GBViews at gbnews.uk. Stay with me here, Patrick Christys, on GB News Live, because after all of your latest headlines from the wonderful Polly Middlehurst, we'll be giving you Cabinet Watch Live as we see who will make the cuts for Liz Truss's Cabinet. But first, yes, as I said, it's Polly with your headlines.
Patrick, thank you. Good evening to you. It's been a busy day in politics. Liz Truss has made her first speech as Prime Minister from the steps of Downing Street, saying she'll turn Britain into an aspiration nation. Addressing the country, Ms Truss praised her predecessor, Boris Johnson, saying history will see him as a hugely consequential Prime Minister. She also promised to tackle the issues which she said were holding Britain back, and she said she'd stand up for freedom and democracy around the world. The new Prime Minister said she had a bold plan to grow the economy through tax cuts and reform, promising to take action this week to secure the UK's energy supply. She says she's determined to deliver.
We'll transform Britain into an aspiration nation with high-paying jobs, safe streets, and where everyone everywhere has the opportunities they deserve. I will take action this day and action every day to make it happen. I am confident that together we can ride out the storm, we can rebuild our economy, and we can become the modern, brilliant Britain that I know we can be.
Liz speaking just a few moments ago. Well, earlier, Buckingham Palace confirmed that Boris Johnson had tendered his resignation, which Her Majesty was graciously pleased to accept, we're told. Mr Johnson and his wife Carrie spent almost 40 minutes with the monarch before leaving Balmoral. Well, Scotland's First Minister has laid out an agenda to introduce emergency legislation to freeze rents and rail fares. It's all part of the Scottish Government's plans to deal with the cost of living crisis. Nicola Sturgeon also announced a temporary hold on evictions and said an energy strategy would be published in the coming year. You're up to date on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. Now let's get back to Patrick.
Right, welcome back, everybody. Hardly time to come up for air here on GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. You are watching us on your TV online. You may be listening to us on your DAB radio as well. But Liz Truss, in the last hour, has just made her maiden speech as Prime Minister from outside Downing Street, where she outlined, at least a little bit, of her vision for Britain and pledged to help families with the cost of living crisis. There's a little bit more for us to get stuck into as well. Let's go to Conservative MP for Ipswich, Tom Hunt, to get his reaction. Tom, thank you very much. It's been a rather long day. It certainly looks like it's been a rather long day on College Green as well. Liz Truss outlining certain things, no mention of immigration. What did you make initially of the first outing for our new Prime Minister?
Well, Patrick, you know how much I care about immigration as an issue, and you know how vocal I've been on that issue. It's one of the reasons I supported Liz Truss over Rishi, was because I thought she was more likely to do what was necessary to deal with illegal immigration. So I'm reassured on that, based on other discussions I've had with her. It was a short, to-the-point speech outside Downing Street. And I'm sure she'll be getting on the job straight away. I'm pleased she won the contest, but she's going to be hard at work right now, and it's a big job to do.
OK, Tom, look, talk to me about this cabinet, because it is absolutely vital at the moment, with all of the different problems or issues facing this country, that Liz Truss gets her picks right. She shuffles her deck and she shuffles them correctly. We're hearing Kwasi Kwarteng potentially for Chancellor. We're hearing potentially Suella Braverman for Home Secretary. Who are you hearing? Come on, give me the inside scoop.
To be perfectly honest with you, Patrick, if I had loads of hidden gems and hidden intelligence, I probably wouldn't be telling you now. But for what it's worth, I don't actually have any inside channels or any inside intelligence. All I know is what you know, which is what's been in the media. And I have to say, some of the names I've seen suggested, I am reassured by. Suella Braverman, for example. She's been connected with a Home Secretary job. In terms of the leadership candidates, I think Suella was the one who took the most robust view on tackling illegal immigration. So certainly that is reassuring, and that would be reassuring to many GB News viewers. Kwasi, always had a lot of time for him. I've had the opportunity to spend time with him before. I think he was a good Business Energy Secretary. He's a low-tax Conservative, which is very reassuring. So, and my views on Kemi Badenoch, because I think she's also marvellous. So I'd love to see Kemi Badenoch have a role in the cabinet. But I trust Liz Truss. I trust Liz's judgment. She's got good judgment, and I'm sure she'll get the right people in the right places.
Well, so does the British public, frankly, it must be said as well. There is still a lot of love going around for Boris Johnson, but Liz Truss, of course, I suppose maybe stands us in good stead on the world stage. Spent a lot of time as Foreign Secretary, struck up a huge amount of trade deals. I remember when we sent that Mars rover up there, I was expecting it to be greeted by Liz Truss for a second with some form of trade deal. So potentially she could be good, you're hoping, domestically, but also on the international stage as well.
Well, she did a great job as International Trade Secretary. She wasted no time at all in securing a huge number of trade deals and trade agreements that the doom-mongers said weren't possible once Britain left the European Union. She did it. She proved it could be done. I think she comes across very much as a statesperson. I think she's going to be strong on the world stage, robust, and she's a patriot. She believes in this country. She's unapologetically pro-Britain, and she thinks Britain's the greatest country in the world. And I know that's the case, and you know that's the case, Patrick. And most GB News viewers think we're the greatest country in the world. We just need to start showing it every single day. And on the world stage, I think she'll be just as good as she'll be domestically.
Tom, thank you very much for joining us. Tom Hunt there from outside the Houses of Parliament. That's Conservative MP for Ipswich, giving his reaction to Liz Truss's maiden speech as Prime Minister. He was talking about us needing a Prime Minister who actually backs Britain. Yes, of course, I'm sure Boris Johnson did as well. He's just making a point, really, that there's a lot of doing Britain down at the moment in this country. Are we tearing ourselves apart with things like culture wars and all of this stuff when there's bigger things going on? But we've been getting several people reacting to Liz Truss's maiden speech. We are going to be shortly anyway, as far as I understand it, going to... what would you call a Tory grandee? I'm not sure. Certainly an established political commentator, Edwina Currie. But just to recap, let's go now to a replay of Liz Truss's maiden speech. Just see what you made of this, OK?
Good afternoon. I have just accepted Her Majesty the Queen's kind invitation to form a new government. Let me pay tribute to my predecessor. Boris Johnson delivered Brexit, the COVID vaccine, and stood up to Russian aggression. History will see him as a hugely consequential Prime Minister. I'm honoured to take on this responsibility at a vital time for our country. What makes the United Kingdom great is our fundamental belief in freedom, in enterprise, and in fair play. Our people have shown grit, courage, and determination time and time again. We now face severe global headwinds caused by Russia's appalling war in Ukraine and the aftermath of COVID. Now is the time to tackle the issues that are holding Britain back. We need to build roads, homes, and broadband faster. We need more investment and great jobs in every town and city across our country. We need to reduce the burden on families and help people get on in life. I know that we have what it takes to tackle those challenges. Of course, it won't be easy, but we can do it. We will transform Britain into an aspiration nation with high-paying jobs, safe streets, and where everyone, everywhere, has the opportunities they deserve. I will take action this day and action every day to make it happen. United with our allies, we will stand up for freedom and democracy around the world, recognising that we can't have security at home without having security abroad. As Prime Minister, I will pursue 3 early priorities. Firstly, I will get Britain working again. I have a bold plan to grow the economy through tax cuts and reform. I will cut taxes to reward hard work and boost business-led growth and investment. I will drive reform in my mission to get the United Kingdom working, building and growing. We'll get spades in the ground to make sure people are not facing unaffordable energy bills, and we will also make sure that we are building hospitals, schools, roads and broadband. Secondly, I will deal hands-on with the energy crisis caused by Putin's war. I will take action this week to deal with energy bills and to secure our future energy supply. Thirdly, I will make sure that people can get doctors' appointments and the NHS services they need. We will put our health service on a firm footing. By delivering on the economy, on energy and on the NHS, we will put our nation on the path to long-term success. We shouldn't be daunted by the challenges we face. As strong as the storm may be, I know that the British people are stronger. Our country was built by people who get things done. We have huge reserves of talent, of energy and determination. I am confident that together we can ride out the storm. We can rebuild our economy and we can become the modern, brilliant Britain that I know we can be. This is our vital mission to ensure opportunity and prosperity for all people and future generations. I am determined to deliver. Thank you.
Yeah, you know what? It's Patrick Christys here, by the way, GB News Live. That was, of course, the second hearing that I've had now of Liz Truss's maiden speech as Prime Minister, and I think it sounded to me anyway. I don't know about what you think at home, or if you're listening or watching us anywhere, get in touch. That sounded a lot better second time round to me, that. Perhaps we were a little bit quick to jump on the fact there wasn't too much detail in there. I have just heard it back. I heard it first time live alongside everybody else who's watching and listening now, so you'll have to forgive me, of course, but I think there was a bit more detail than perhaps I gave her credit for there. She did speak a lot about putting shovels in the ground, about tackling the energy crisis. And I think one thing I found really reassuring, I don't know about you listening or watching now, was actually that she did paint Britain up. She said a key line there for me, which was that, yes, OK, that we are in a storm at the minute. We undoubtedly are in a storm at the minute, but the strength of the British people will actually be able to weather that storm. Talking Britain up. Perhaps she was actually a little bit more positive and a little bit clearer than I gave her credit for initially. Conservative Minister Edwina Currie joins me now. Former Conservative Minister, I should say. I've just promoted you, unless you're about to be in Liz Truss's new cabinet, but there we go. Thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Yes, it's always tricky when you're doing a rolling live news show. You hear something for the first time, then you hear it again. And I must say, I came away from it the second time feeling rather different. OK, there wasn't much of it, well, any mention really of immigration, which is an issue. But what do you make of Liz Truss's speech there?
First of all, she looked absolutely delighted to be a Prime Minister and was actually...
We've lost Edwina, don't worry, we'll get Edwina Currie back. I think that's the problem when you're doing an interview live from the Peak District. That's one of Liz Truss's key points, was to try to improve broadband across the country, actually. And maybe now Liz Truss can actually go to the Peak District and get our Edwina back. Edwina Currie will be with us again very, very shortly. But yes, I do want to know what you at home thought of that. Like I said, I'll hold my hands up. The very first time that I listened to Liz Truss's speech, I thought it was a little bit wishy-washy. Perhaps not so much the second time. Edwina's back. Liz Truss, in her first act as Prime Minister, has just lost Edwina Currie's broadband yet again. So off to a bad start, but there we go. Don't worry, we will be joining you again with Edwina Currie very shortly. I couldn't give a monkey, says Victoria. Not about poor old Edwina, of course, but Liz Truss was wooden and speechless, and speechless, apparently. There we go. Well, she wasn't literally speechless because she was doing a speech, but there we go. Everyone needs to give her a break. This is Michael. Mark, everyone needs to give her a break. She has the toughest job in the world. Will she have a honeymoon period for you? She did mention, of course, various different things there, actually. Whilst ignoring immigration, she was talking about putting investment into our public services, which is vital. She was talking about helping people to deal with their energy bills and their energy costs. They are skyrocketing. There is strong talk of an energy bill freeze, a maximum of £2,500 for some people there. And indeed, that will cost about 130 billion quid to the public coffers. She also spoke a lot about essentially talking Britain up, didn't she? And building houses. All of this stuff is good, and it's what we actually need to take place in this country. But is it more hot air from someone, or is it actually going to get done? And do you think, as well, that Liz Truss actually could defeat Keir Starmer in a general election? Some stuff that we're going to be bringing your way over the course this evening, and I certainly hope very shortly, is going to be Cabinet announcements. We're just going to give you some of those top tips as well. Kwasi Kwarteng is hotly tipped to become the next Chancellor of the Exchequer. We're also hearing Suella Braverman is going to be the Home Secretary. Tom Hunt, Conservative MP for Ipswich, who we had on shortly before, was saying that Suella Braverman had a lot of his support during the initial round of Conservative leadership voting because she was so strong on immigration. And I think that seems to be something that basically people are wanting to see in the channel, although, of course, it is interesting, actually, and these emails are coming in thick and fast now, GBViews or at gbnews.uk, talking about the fact that Liz Truss did not really mention immigration whatsoever in her speech there, but the Cabinet is supposed to be announced. She's going to want to get underway there very, very shortly and get rocking and rolling and be shown to be, indeed, a woman in action. You may have seen a little glimpse there of Mark White as he hot fuzzed it into the studio. Mark, thank you very much for joining us, and keep these emails coming in as well, people. gbviews at gbnews.uk. Liz Truss, I think I'll listen to it second time round there. There was a little bit more detail potentially than
a bit more excited by it now, are you?
I'm a little bit more gripped by Truss. The first time round it was potentially difficult to let it all sink in.
I thought it was fine. It was measured. You know, these speeches are never great on detail. They're a few minutes long. It's just a, hi, I'm here, got a job to do, and
let's crack on.
And she's in, and she's going to get on with that. As Nigel Farage was saying to you, you know, let's see how this develops over the next few days. And, of course, the first thing that we'll all be watching out for is those movements in and out of the Cabinet.
I've just got some breaking news for you to react to immediately. Dominic Raab has resigned.
Well, no surprise, because like Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, who's still in the job until the new Home Secretary is appointed, he will be only too aware of all of the noises that have been in the press and elsewhere about the fact that he is going to be out of a job. And, of course, he would expect that himself. He was not a backer at all of Liz Truss. He put his weight firmly behind Rishi Sunak.
And indeed, as is the modern way, Mark, Dominic Raab has apparently resigned via Twitter. So there we go. We can see it now. I will read it out for all of our radio listeners. Dominic Raab says, thanks to the brilliant Ministry of Justice team for all their hard work over the last year. Good luck to the new Prime Minister and her team. I look forward to supporting the government from the back benches. There we go. So that's Dominic Raab, who has resigned. And, yes, we'll be expecting, he's, of course, the Deputy Prime Minister as well. This might, Mark, tie in with what we've been hearing, increasing rumours throughout the day. Therese Coffey allegedly been holed up in Downing Street for the best part of about 6 hours now. Could well become Deputy Prime Minister as well.
Yeah, I mean...
As Health Minister.
Very, very close to Liz Truss, so it would not surprise us. But obviously, in terms of the justice role, that in itself is an important role. You remember, or you probably won't, because you're a young lad,
well,
but a few years back now, about 15 years or so,
yes.
The Home Office was gripped by crisis. But that was at a time when the Home Office also had responsibility for the justice system and our prisons. And it was decided then to hive it off to have its own separate department. But it's a very important department because it's our court systems, our criminal justice system and our prison system, with more than 80,000 people in our prisons up and down the country.
And I think something that's potentially been a bit lost today, Mark, in all of this noise about, well, is Liz Truss landing? Is she going to be inside or outside due to the rain? What's she going to say about immigration? What's she going to say about the cost of living? Is she freezing bills? It's actually law and order. This is another massive, massive issue for most people facing in this country at the minute. Every single day we wake up to people being stabbed to death or shot to death, violent crime in general being up. We're seeing increasing clamours for things like, full life terms for terrorists, etc. She mentioned putting shovels in the ground. I think she was talking about housing. Does she need to say the same thing about prisons as well? Build more of those?
Well, I mean, that may be a byproduct of her call to get back to basics in policing. It's clear that she wants a tougher approach in some senses, and clearly wants to, as she said actually in her speech there before entering Downing Street, that she would be looking for safer streets for people in the UK as well. So clearly that is around policing and an acknowledgement that there is real concern about violent crime right across the country. Just overnight in London, an incident in which police firearmed officers were stopping and chasing a vehicle. A young man was shot dead by those firearms officers. It is ever present. Notting Hill Carnival, again, serious and fatal stabbings that took place there. So some real concern about violent crime and also about the criminal justice element of it. Are those who are being convicted of crimes actually getting the proper sentence? So that's, again, something that falls on the Justice Secretary. And we've had a lot about the issue of whether people should serve whole life tariffs. If you remember, Wayne Couzens, for instance, was appealing his whole life tariff, and there was a huge uproar that this former police officer who murdered Sarah Everard in London, kidnapped, raped and then murdered her, should be trying to appeal that whole life tariff and hoping to get it reduced. So a lot of concern always amongst the public about the way in which the criminal justice system is implemented and whether actually the people that are committing the most crimes and the worst crimes are appropriately punished.
I found a really interesting email in here, Mark, and this is from Carol, actually, thank you very much, Carol, GBViews, GBnews.uk. I got rather emotional at our new Prime Minister's speech, Carol says. I thought she was very reassuring. Yes, OK, she didn't directly address things like immigration, but she did, however, address our concerns, and I'm quite certain she's going to tackle that in the coming days. She follows it up by saying, simmer down, folks. All right, Carol. But that's a really interesting point, that, Mark, because you've been around the political and indeed news scene for
many, many years.
Glad you said it, not me. But actually, do you think now the people are genuinely looking for reassurance? There's a lot of, forgive me for being a bit simplistic here, scary stuff out there. We've got a problem with immigration. We've got a problem internationally. We've got a cost of living crisis. There's violent crime on the streets, in a massive way. Do you think now more than ever people are looking for a leader to almost put their arms around them a little bit?
Yes, and also maybe someone that doesn't have to be the most amazing orator, but someone who's actually about substance and about getting things done. I think people will probably welcome that. I think you put that very well. There is an awful lot of scary stuff that's going about, not just in this country, but abroad, of course, looking at what is happening in Ukraine with the war there, the increasingly bellicose language that we're getting from China around Taiwan. There's a lot to do. And interestingly, she said as well, before going into Downing Street, in her short speech there, that she wanted to ensure that security abroad was achieved, because you can't have security at home unless you have security abroad.
Mark, fantastic stuff as always. Mark White there, of course, our Home and Security Editor. Final thoughts now from Darren McCaffrey, who is still at Downing Street for us, our political editor, who watched Liz Truss's maiden speech on Downing Street. Darren, thank you very much. What's the latest from where you are?
Well, it's already begun, hasn't it? The key workings of government, and what is the first priority of Liz Truss administration? That is setting a cabinet in position. In the last couple of minutes, I think you've been reflecting on it. Dominic Raab is out of government, possibly the least surprising news of the day, along with the weather, saying that he wanted to thank the Ministry of Justice team, and he's looking forward to supporting Liz Truss administration from the backbenches. What we're now expecting, Patrick, in the next couple of minutes is to see those incoming cabinet ministers walk up this very famous street behind me and to go in through that black door and get appointed in some of the key positions by Liz Truss. Just a very quick reflection on that speech itself. There was lots of discussion, wasn't there, about whether she's going to touch on just how difficult things are for the country at the moment. She certainly did that, though with an optimistic tone that she thought Britain could get through this storm together. But in terms of the tone, a real contrast to Boris Johnson. I think that's a deliberate strategy in many regards, that none of the flowery language, none of the kind of, you know, frankly, the charisma that you got from Boris Johnson earlier on today. This was a much more serious, a much more sombre, much more direct message from Liz Truss. We're going to see that a lot more over the weeks and months to come, not least of all because, frankly, and let's be frank about this, that's who Liz Truss is. She hasn't got the dial range, I think, that Boris Johnson has. And maybe for some out there in the country, that's precisely what they're looking for.
Much great stuff today so far. It may well be quite a long night for you as well. Darren McCaffrey there, our political editor. He even moonlighted as weatherman earlier on. It's been great to have you on the show throughout it, Darren, bringing us bang up to date from the epicentre of British power there, 10 Downing Street. Thank you so much, everybody, who's clung on through what was a rather stormy ride at times here at GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. And I'll be back again tomorrow, of course, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. We've got Michelle Dewberry coming up your way with Jubes & Co. We will also have Nigel Farage. We'll also have all of the big hitters this evening. We've got some big names coming your way for all of the best reaction to what is a momentous day in British politics as Liz Truss gave her maiden speech as Prime Minister of this fair nation. Make sure you stick with us right here at GB News because we're going to be bringing you bang up to date as this cabinet announcement rolls in, OK? We're expecting it a bit earlier, but no, we're going to get it a little bit later on this evening, which means one thing and one thing only. You're going to have to stick with us for several more hours. Yeah, thank you very, very much, everybody. I will see you at 3 p.m. tomorrow. I've been Patrick Christys. This has been GB News Live. I'll be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. Now, though, it's your weather, it's your news. Stay tuned.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.